Good afternoon, everybody. This is a work session of the Basalt Town Council to meet with our design staff to review emerging ideas for downtown improvements for Midland Avenue. So I don't know who wants to lead off. I know we have Elise Wolf. Catherine, is this going to be your good deal? So Catherine Christoph will present the item, and so we've got about an hour and 15 minutes scheduled for this because we have to eat, and then we have some, town business that we got to take care of. But I think we've all had probably a sneak preview of this, so some very exciting ideas here for us to look at. So you guys have the floor, and you might want to do some introductions so we all know who's here.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Town Council members, and also P&Z commissioners that we have both in person and on the line. As a reminder, I'm Catherine Christoph. I'm the town engineer. I've been working on this project with our design team. As you all recall, this project is intended to include the replacement of deep and shallow utilities, as well as the improvements to the surface level streetscape, including sidewalks, improving ADA accessibility, parking, landscaping, and lighting. In March, Council approved the engagement of the design and CMGC services with the Connect One design team of Connect One Design, Cushing, Terrell, and Sopris Engineering. And then we're also working with, for CMGC services, we're working with Stutzman Gerbaz as well. And they've joined us here tonight. The team has been working on the development of 3 conceptual plans, which will be presented to you this evening, and we're currently seeking feedback from you all, and won't be seeking any specific direction tonight. We'll be back in front of you in late June, seeking more input on direction, but just want to talk with you all about your feedback this evening. And I started by introducing myself, and I'll let the design team take it from here as this is their baby, and I'm sure they can all introduce themselves. So thank you all for being here, and take it away.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll just switch so I'm at the microphone. Thanks. Heather Henry, Connect One Design, one of the founding principals of Connect One Design. With me is your illustrious project manager for this project, Elise Wolf.
Yep.
And I think we have, so Phil, did Catherine just introduce you? Phil Vaughn Construction.
I'm Phil Vaughn Construction Management.
And
Good to see me.
who do we have online from our team?
Art Melito is a planner with Cushing Terrell, and Stephanie Helfenbein from Sopris Engineering.
Okay, so all folks are represented here this evening. 2 things, while James is sharing the screen, you should have a little packet in front of you. There are also some highlighters, so if you haven't grabbed a highlighter, grab a highlighter, pass them around. Make sure it works also. Would be great. This is going to be fully interactive this evening. So we can just kind of go ahead and jump in. So we'll switch to our first slide. So we are... Sorry, you can change slides. Thanks, James. We're calling this our NFA schedule. That's no fooling around. We don't swear in this room, so it's our no fooling around schedule. So there's just a few highlights. On the next page, I talk about between now and the end of June. But a few highlights, if you saw this in your packet, we have a lot of things happening concurrently. So we kind of come to P&Z, we come to council at different stages in the 30, 60, 90. We're coming at the same time, we're probably doing pricing and our QA, QC process. So, there's a lot of overlap in here, and there's not a whole lot of flexibility. So this is gonna be a real team effort to make sure that we are hitting these deadlines. But we're committed on our end, and so there'll be kind of, this is our nod to P&Z and council to say we'll need your help as well as we come to you all to help make decisions and make sure we're on the right track and set this train in motion. Next slide. So our next few weeks, let's say, again, between now and the end of June, are extremely critical. So this is first what we're calling work session, right? So you all are seeing 3 options that are on the table, 3 alternatives, 3, we're calling them showcases. That said, we're viewing this as a little bit of a buffet. We get feedback tonight. We come back to P&Z 2 more times. So we come back next week, probably just with a little bit of refinement to what you see this evening. And next week, big work session with P&Z to actually start to try to narrow down, take this buffet and figure out what's actually on our plate. So that the 3rd meeting with P&Z, we're actually getting direction on the preferred alternative. And so as you guys saw in your packet, that's probably a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and a little bit of this. And then that final recommendation is recommendation for preferred option. That'll carry forward to council, and council making pretty much launching this train on its tracks, okay? So from at that point, we go to 30, 60, 90, and then we're putting together a lot of details, but of the things you saw in your packet, we really know where we're headed, right? How the pedestrian realm is gonna come together, how the parking, how the loading, all the things that, all the ingredients that bake this bread. So you'll see mixed in there, we've also got our public input. So tonight we're presenting a little bit of our initial outreach. What did people say they would love to see in this streetscape? What would make it unique? They're gonna see pretty much the same packet that you're seeing tonight. So that's going out, we're doing pop-up open house. It's not a pop-up, it's an open house. It's kind of everything at Midland's, at Motors on Midland. So that's this Saturday. Concurrent with that, we'll launch another online survey so people can, again, give the same feedback to this packet of alternatives and ideas, select here and there what they love. And then we're doing another business after hours pop-up. So the chamber was gracious enough to kind of say, hey, why don't you take over our business after hours on the 19th, present all these ideas. That's obviously a really great kind of captive audience for businesses, and obviously businesses on Midland. And so that'll start to get rolled into, again, you can see how we're concurrent, like P&Z is gonna see more info next week, but they're not gonna see this public input until the next meeting when we're moving towards that preferred alternative, okay? Next slide.
Well, and then after that June 28th, so we'll get a preferred option going forward, and then, yeah, we're working on that 30, 60, 90% construction documents that will finish up basically by the end of the year and get construction rolling early spring next year.
So gross maximum price in January is where we're headed. Probably not new to you guys to see some of these images, but for some folks it has been. They kind of said, what's with the gas station?
Are we calling this gross maximum price or guaranteed maximum price?
Guaranteed.
Sorry, guaranteed, thanks.
Guaranteed feels a lot better up here.
The voice from above. Thank you for that correction. So these are really fun images, and new to some people, right? Some people said, what's with the gas station? Like, what is that? That's Alpine Bank. So, you had this kind of progression from the railroad age to probably a next generation, and then what you see out there right now is really, say, 3rd generation of what's happened on Midland in a lot of ways. So initially, some of our observations in the 1st generation were these fabulous boardwalks outside of buildings. So you kind of had facade, and a little boardwalk would kind of define that facade and that building, and then dirt face to face between those boardwalks, right? 2nd generation was a lot of that stayed in place. So some of that personality outside of each building was maintained, but then we just paved face to face instead of dirt. And then 3rd generation, so as you saw, say, right around the time of like an Alpine Bank and some of those things, curb and gutter, more defined parking, et cetera. So that's really your 3rd generation out there. So a historic Midland is really interesting to think about because it didn't have a historic streetscape, but it did have, these buildings and these kind of defined spaces. And you'll see that in some of our alternatives. Next slide. you all gave us most of these goals, so I probably don't have to reiterate these. But obviously, we're here not just to think about what's under the ground and to make sure we're bringing that, up to now and the next 100 years, but also what's above the ground. And so that's very much about, the longevity, the sustainability, the personality, the vibrancy. So there's kind of this really great mix of utilitarian and who are we, the undefined part of Basalt. And so all of that is going to be happening in this project. And I'm happy to stop whenever you guys want me to. Sorry, James, next slide. I feel like you should read my mind. You can't read my mind. I know, it's crazy. Okay. So as opposed to just precedent imagery, some of these were not in your packet. We had this idea of just precedent innovation. And so a few things that jumped out for us as a team as we started to do our kickoff, thinking about smart streets. So what does that really mean? A lot of that can be integrating technology, whether it's for parking enforcement, whether it's for thinking about mobile loading zone apps and how to make sure trucks are coordinated, things like that. How to bring Wi-Fi into the streets and fully integrate that, right? So instead of 5G is plopped up on whatever, X building, we're thinking about how some of those things are integrated into the street. Also thinking about street trees, and the town has these amazing resources that we're already working with, have done so many different versions of street trees, kind of are working towards their own latest and greatest technology. So we're really excited to figure out how to integrate that into also latest and greatest stormwater, right? So a couple images kind of on the bottom left and then just next to it. So bottom left here and just next to it here, stormwater and the integration of that with our street trees, how they're literally feeding each other, right? Looking at some things that are happening around diurnal use, so what can happen in the morning, in the midday, and the evening, but then also what can happen in the summer and the winter. And so things like this that can be brought in and then moved away, and this might be outdoor dining and then it's snow storage, right? This might be loading in the morning and then outdoor dining in the evening. We had a few different traffic calming ideas, some totally out there that this, Stephanie's on here and Cushing Terrell going, you're gonna cause a traffic accident. But basically let's break outside of the box a little bit and have some fun. We had some people on our citizen survey that said build humor, build some fun into the streetscape. But obvious traffic calming as well, right? And we have different versions of that. Thinking about and pushing our own envelopes a little bit about how to bring snow melt. We had some fabulous examples of how, they're doing miles and miles of snow melt off of geothermal, things like that. But bringing that in, how can that help with snow storage and melt and things like that, even if we're using it in small spaces. And then obviously planter technology, making sure that part of this street tree approach and that technology is brought into our planters as well. So this is kind of priming your pump for some of the things that you're gonna see as we pick our precedent, and then we're moving into 30, 60, 90. And we're gonna be asking hard questions, and we're gonna be asking for things to sometimes not be done the way they are right now. And that's really of everyone, right? That's gonna be of staff, that's gonna be of you guys, to just really start to think outside of the box and what can be brought to the table. Next slide. I won't go into the site analysis too much. I think you guys can kind of take a look at it later. A lot of this has been a walk-around site analysis, what are we observing? Probably the critical component of the site analysis is also our tree inventory. So that's, as...
Sorry, how do you repeat that? What'd you say?
Tree inventory.
Okay.
So Chris has done pretty much a full tree inventory. So there are not a lot of sacred specimens out there, but there's a few, and they're in critical places. And so as we kind of move forward some of these alternatives, we get to the preferred, this is one of the first layers that we're gonna do when we start to detail out the streetscape is our street tree inventory.
One of the big takeaways from the site analysis too, I mean, it's obvious, but the southern facing facades have a very different perspective when we talk to them about, what are your snow issues, what are your heat issues, things like that, than the north facing facades.
Yep, this like critical microclimate that changes summer and winter, right? Blazing hot in the summer. Next slide. So hopefully you all got the full report from the survey that we did in your packet, but just, a couple of highlights. There was a real top 5. This is pretty hard to read. So pretty much our top 5 was very similar between the pop-up that we did, asking this same question, what do you want to see on the streetscape, and the online survey. So outdoor dining, pedestrian first design, trees, planting beds, flowers, like landscape has come up across the board, not only with businesses, but also with the community. And then street furnishings and visitor parking were top of the list for our pop-up. Bike infrastructure came up a little bit higher in the online version. So just recognizing how many people in the summer get to downtown via bikes. And that was recognized in the question that said, how do you get to downtown? So the bike pretty much rivaled the car for folks, and when they got to say when, obviously in the summertime. And so, interestingly, like some of the bottom of the list was some of the electric infrastructure. So whether it was electric bikes, electric vehicles, again, I think just weighed against like outdoor dining or something. It was kind of like, no, I'd rather see that. So a lot of what we're doing in our projects is just ensuring that the infrastructure, so say conduit is available to make any parking spaces electric in the future, to make spaces that are bike parking electrified in the future, even if you don't kind of put it in right now. And so those were sort of bottom of the list. Again, performance area, some public art, those were a little bit bottom of the list. Although, when asked about what makes Basalt unique, many people reference art. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I think, again, if I were to trade off space taken up for outdoor dining for art, if they have to each have very individualized space, I'm going to put outdoor dining up, above that. So from our perspective, we read a few things about, like, how do you just integrate art so it doesn't just sort of take up its own space or its own realm, but it is just a part of these other things. It's a part of the dining. It's a part of the pedestrian separation, right? It's a part of vertical elements. It's part of the lighting. Like, whatever it is, it has a lot of uses. A couple of other things, because we know we're going to get into a parking discussion with you all, and what are the trade-offs we're willing to make for parking. You can see if you can zoom in on those two, James. So we asked two pretty critical questions, right? As opposed to just, how do you feel about parking? And everyone says not enough. It's never enough. More cars, but I hate cars. So, right, that's always our challenge. We really wanted to ask these two things, right? So how often do you get to downtown and you cannot find a place to park? And so if you took our usually, sometimes, rarely, and never am I, lost for a place to park, we were at sort of 95%. We were at about 67% if you just said sometimes, rarely, and never. So that's a little telling. That is it about, I can't ever find a place, or I might have to park a little bit further away from my destination. So then we said, okay, so how far would you walk, right? So how far are you willing to park away from your destination? And again, we have a pretty good bell curve, with the highest part of the bell curve being 1,000 feet. And we described this. So we said 1,000 feet is essentially the length of like walking the historic Midland, let's say from the corner here, up to just past Skips. And so that's the highest part of our bell curve. And again, if we look kind of at the 1,000, 500, 200, we gather up the majority of folks, right? So, and a lot of people said, if there's something cool along the walk, I'll walk further, okay? So we just want to make sure we're kind of keeping some of this in mind as we get into how we might be thinking parking, how we might, are we reducing it, are we increasing it, are we moving it around?
Hey, Heather, can I interrupt you? In this work, did you get a sense of how knowledgeable people were about our efforts to use the elementary school parking lot as an adjunct to downtown?
So this last one that says 15,000 feet, it says I'd park at the elementary school and walk. And so, you know, you had about 10% that said, yeah, I'd walk that far. And then in the open-ended, Bill, a lot of the reference was, again, to that, like, it's not a pleasant walk. So I think it's something to really keep in mind, that there was some kind of open-ended comments that, like, you know, I might, and I walk further if it's like, if it's cool.
You think it's because of lighting or the topography or, I mean,
Yeah,
walking
not-
across the
not probably
swinging bridge is not exactly a miserable
Right? I mean, it's
walking
not totally
experience.
unpleasant, right? I think safety might be an issue. I think lighting, I think
Being
probably
aware,
just.
signage.
Yes, yeah, there was
Alternate
actually
route.
several references around signage, yep. Like this way to downtown or whatever, you know, shopping here. So I think there's good awareness, and I think maybe
So-
kind of pulling apart some of people's individual
Yeah.
responses on that one would be
So
really helpful.
inevitably, you're going to get to evaluating these schemes in terms of the gross sort of parking count. So we're going to be taking
That's right.
some angle parking out, replacing it with parallel parking, and some sections here, and then, you know, we're going to add angle parking, which was historically parallel parking, looks like, in some of these ideas here.
Correct.
So I would just encourage you to include that, at least for the summer months, which is obviously peak demand, but I would
Yep.
include that elementary school count in the
Okay.
analysis. And then we've got to do what we've got to do to make that a more attractive experience for people.
Okay.
We just did little solar lights out there and some gravel, called it good, which, in my mind, it was good. Ted?
All but 3 of those disappeared in the first 2 weeks.
What, Ted?
All but 3 of those lights you guys just put in this spring are gone. They're either stolen or broken. There's 3 left.
Were there at residences now?
Yeah, right?
I don't know where they are.
Somebody's entrance.
So, yeah, I mean, that's
river.
deserving of a hardwired, you know, low voltage, you know, landscape lighting kind of commitment. So that's,
Great.
I just want to make sure that kind of doesn't,
Yeah, because the
outside
math that's in
stays
your
in the scope.
packet,
yeah.
does not, right? That's pretty much Midland Spur, and it doesn't even count what's on Two Rivers. We just did Midland Spur, we did like what we're touching, and we did the math between
Yeah.
existing and then what the alternatives might do to the count. So we can go ahead and do kind of a bigger look at that, for sure.
Okay, great.
Cool. And then just some themes. You know, again, not super surprising, right? Like, funky, don't overdo it, keep it simple. Historic, rivers, fishing, our outdoor lifestyle, you know, word cloud wise, those absolutely came up the most. I think there's kind of a combination of like what historic means, and some people referenced, you know, how can it be like modern Western, right? Because again, you think back to those photos we looked at, there's not this kind of overwhelming, like, your streetscape looks like it walked out of the Victorian age. Like, nope, definitely not, when you look at the historic photos. And so there is this sense of like, but there's this funkiness to downtown that we want to keep, right? And not kind of cleaning it up too much. So the outdoor gathering, the dining, all of that was really a critical component. And we'll go, so the next one, Elise, is, we have been meeting with all of the landowners and tenants, pretty much all of Midland, as well as individuals that are even off of Midland and are kind of served. We're probably 50% of the way through that list, you know, proving pretty challenging even to find people, let alone meet with them. But here's a few themes.
Yeah, so we've been doing about an hour interview with them about their current uses, their visionary goals, and then some construction and civil engineering questions. So themes that we're starting to see come up. They admittedly know that their employees are parking on Midland and not leaving space for visitors. partially because that there's no enforcement of like the 2-hour parking rule. It's come back about 50-50 on recognizing speeding or traffic issues on Midland. Didn't see anything super consistent. Everybody seems to be recognizing a lack of parking. Identifying the center loading zones as being a mess, but where else do they go? They don't have back alleys. And it seems that the loading times have gotten more chaotic, especially during COVID. They really need those loading zones throughout the day. We asked about icing and snow removal. Everybody who has a roof that sheds onto the sidewalk is consistently battling with icing issues. They've also mentioned the snow storage taking up parking spaces in the winter. Signage, it's coming back that like individual businesses feel well signed, but there seems to be a lack of like signage for downtown, and this is way out of our scope, but lots of things like people don't even know that there's a downtown back here when they travel on 82.
Or that it's historic. I think even though we've really been trying to get a lot of signage out there.
Yeah.
So.
But I've heard relatively few safety issues of break-ins or theft or anything like that, so how wonderful for Basalt. Visionary goals. There have been repeated requests for hanging baskets, overflowing, flowers. Crested Butte was referenced numerous times. They even go into, we need a program to water these flowers. You need to run irrigation up the light post to water the hanging baskets. It was kind of overwhelming.
This would be the geranium, would be the plant of choice.
I don't know.
Yeah, peony alley. I don't know.
Petunias? I don't know.
Yeah. People are loving the sacred spaces at like Codger's Corner, the Caboose, outdoor dining. I know we're coming off of COVID, and this summer the town is not looking to do the outdoor dining, but people have said they want to bring that back in the future. We asked them about if they think there should be a consistent language on the streetscape between Willits and downtown, and resoundingly it was no. They're two different entities entirely. We're dealing with a historic one here. We're dealing with a new development here. No hate on Willits, but they have to be different in their own being. Mostly because the downtown wants to bring people for a reason, and Willits wants to bring people for a reason, and so they need their own look, their own feel. There were definitely mentions of artwork, rich material selections. Want to see unique streetscape, nothing linear, something that honors the gritty history and eclectic feel, a mix of modern and historic. We asked them what they hope it feels like. Lots of home, small town, family living, comfortable, cozy, quaint, vitality, convivial. And then construction. Nobody threw tomatoes at our head yet, but they just said, absolutely communicate. We need to know what's going on weekly and ahead of time. And, everybody seems to be fairly flexible. They just need to know when it's going to happen, because they'll work out of the Willits office, or they'll close shop for a couple weeks, or they'll have to tell their patrons where to park. They're already thinking about these options in their heads. They just have to know ahead of time. We asked them about longer construction hours, giving you a shorter construction season, or the opposite, shorter construction hours over a long construction season, and it seemed that it was the former. They said rip the Band-Aid off, make people work 24/7 if it means a shorter construction season.
Yeah.
And people were open to kind of a campaign during construction You know, people are worried about their businesses coming out of COVID, and they said, you know, we have to be able to run through, to be open during this construction. So whatever we can do with the chamber, you know, with our design team to do a downtown is open kind of campaign, maybe a wine walk or something, like a passport for businesses to get people in there.
All right, next slide. So we're gonna kind of get into a little bit of the back and forth and the work session part of this. So we reorganized things a little bit from your packet. So you got to kind of get comfortable with the 3 different alternatives and what was included in each of those. So now we're actually gonna like explode this into a kit of parts. So hopefully you got to take a quick look at this kind of differentiator, but we really wanted to make sure all these things on the left-hand side, we're making sure we're addressing. And then the idea with these alternatives is that we address them each a little differently, right? So that, again, tonight, and ultimately, we're not just saying, we love the linear, go with everything about it, right? It's much more, and that's why you have a highlighter as we go through this fun exercise. It's much more like, I like this from here, and I like this from here, and this from here. Maybe right now, some of these don't exactly go together, but that's why we get paid the huge bucks. So that's kind of the idea at the end of the day. So what we want to do is start that a little bit tonight. So the 3 alternatives, go to the next slide, please, James. So the 3 alternatives, let's just kind of talk about what they are from the 50,000 foot level. So our rooms showcase. Somebody asked if this was like The Price is Right. So I wish I knew the theme song. So the idea with the rooms is that while streetscapes are effectively linear by nature, right? We have travel lanes, we have space for parking, and we have the space between the back of curb and the buildings, right? And all of those things are sort of moving linearly. The idea with the rooms, though, is that it's kind of broken up, and it more plays around with the facades of the building. So in a way, it has a little bit of that engagement with the historic space where here was the boardwalk right outside my facade. And that would actually come out into the streetscape now, okay? So it's probably ends up being a bit more eclectic. There can be artwork integrated into each of these rooms. Those rooms might define outdoor dining spaces or someone's just sort of little, you know, front space or front yard if you're Sotheby's, let's say, and you're not, you know, you're an office. And so that's kind of just the overall 50,000 foot of rooms. Our linear, the next one, and no matter what, the materials themselves could be any different version. So they might be modern, kind of contemporary, they could be very historic, they could be artsy and eclectic. So you can still like mix and match how things look with these showcases, okay? So kind of pulling yourself away and just, you know, think about how kind of all of this comes together, right? So our linear, again, you embrace the linear nature of a streetscape. You have, you tend to have a lot more uniformity, right? The same paving might go from back of curb to the building facades throughout. You might have kind of a very similar nature to your planting areas or raised planters or things like that, right? So it tends to kind of draw people along as they look down a streetscape like that. It kind of draws their eye along that path, and that's linear. That might be, if you thought about it, a little bit more traditional in terms of streetscapes. And then our last one, the next slide. Half the team says woo nerf. Ryan Mahoney says woo nerf, like that. So decide for yourself. So this is essentially what is considered kind of a flat realm streetscape, okay? So from building facade to building facade. One of the critical components is that you're getting rid of your curb and gutter. You are differentiating zones, whether for parking or pedestrians or some outdoor dining, very differently. You might be doing it with bollards and lighting and artwork and planters. And generally, and in our version, It also means you're changing the stormwater design. So as opposed to stormwater on the surface and on the edges and in the curb and gutter, much like you have out there right now, you're kind of changing how that works and you're bringing it to the center of the Woonerf, okay? So lots of different examples of that again.
Woonerf means living street, and it originated as a European Scandinavian concept, but there are examples of it in the U.S.
Yep, that's a really
I
fun.
was for sure, it was a Dutch beer. I thought
It's a Dutch beer, so you're drinking the living street beer,
Stella,
which is weird.
Woonerf,
Woonerf beer, you thought, yeah, right? Totally, that's our Woonerf IPA, yeah, exactly. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll get into this. So you have a little packet in front of you. The first page was the differentiator matrix. As you kind of flip through, the next page should say planters, trees, and lighting. If you would like to, we would love, as we go through these differentiators, if you want to kind of highlight them now and we like collect some of that, highlight it, make notes, whatever, it'd be great. So you can kind of make this an exercise if you'd like, but certainly you don't have to, don't feel pressured. What we're gonna do is go through each of these though, and talk about the differentiators and get some feedback. And so we're kind of blowing this thing up now, to where you can kind of say, hey, this on the Woonerf and this on the linear. So our first that we're gonna talk about is we wanna really kind of focus on the pedestrian realm. And so planters, trees, and lighting, right? Because the first two slides are the first of what everyone said they wanted: dining, gathering spaces, flowering baskets overflowing, trees, landscape. So we'll talk first about our rooms. So in our rooms, we have what we're thinking about in terms of like raised planters. So getting some soil structure kind of up out of the ground, using that as a little bit of a differentiator of space. We've got trees in some of those planters. We've got the kind of lighting standards and hanging baskets on those. In addition to some of the lighting, here, say street standard lighting, we're also looking at this idea of like string lighting or, just really like highlighted lighting in each of the rooms. And maybe it's different, maybe there's kind of some vertical things, but that's sort of the idea with lighting in the rooms. In the linear, we look at much more at-grade planting, so whether this is in, a tree grate or we've got it in a planting bed, probably a combination of both. So we're at grade, also trees in the sidewalk, and then we're kind of using our lighting standards a little bit more for, say, some of the signage. So bringing in like whether it's that particular business, whether it's like what's happening in downtown, that sort of thing. And there's, again, a lot of different versions of banners. They can go all the way across the street, a la Aspen. They can just be kind of banners like this, etc. So that's the differentiator in the linear. And then
trees in paver grades, which is a little bit different.
yeah.
Yep, right. So it's the idea with this though is that with the linear, trees are very permeable. You're kind of walking through, around, next to them, that sort of thing.
So inevitably, all three are going to make sense in different settings. We're not going to consistently opt for all raised planters or all street trees. But the raised planters, at places, high activity like Cafe Bernard or in front of Tempranillo or something like that offer, if they're 18 inches, we get the benefit of a seat wall from them as well, and also some possible snow storage advantage. So from my perspective, it's pretty appealing functionality there. And seeing what has happened to a lot of our trees that are just kind of like at grade doesn't work out so well. You get accumulated ice and snow and just does violence to the plants.
Yep, when they're not protected.
Yeah.
Yep. Good observation. And lastly, really quick, the Woonerf with some of the idea here with our planters is, say in the street and differentiating that center lane, these may be actually movable. Even some along the streetscape might be movable. So Woonerf, because you don't have a curb anywhere, like you can really think about how all this stuff kind of moves around, right? Again.
Will there be
that
time
really-
to talk about sort of the design, sort of character of the whole scheme? When would you entertain those sort of observations? Towards the end of the meeting, you want to get through these?
I mean, I think it'd be good to maybe get through a few of these
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah, I don't
But I
mean
think
now,
you
but
can
I think-
also integrate some of those thoughts into any of this as well.
Yeah.
So like, hey, I envision if it's movable planters, you know, they're wood or they're like, I want less metal or like, so I'd say don't be afraid to kind of infuse it
Put
into,
it out there?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then
Guys, Bill,
some of
you
this
guys,
in the ground.
P and Z guys are here too, so weigh in, you know. But yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts, but I'll hold off here for a little while.
Sure, but yeah, I mean, whenever.
I did want to mention one thing about these three schemes, especially with the Wunderf one, because one thing that I've heard for years and years about downtown Basalt is that it's one of the most inaccessible downtowns from, you know, just from an ADA standpoint. That, you know, people who are in any way accessibility challenged have a really hard time getting around. And with the Wunderf, you can go anywhere. Yeah. And, you know, that's a very nice feature of it. And it takes people's eye off the fact that our town hall is completely inaccessible.
You know, every sort of rendering or example, and I think there's some wonderful elements of the Wunderf scheme, seem to show, it seems to be driven by the land use character. So it's very European in that it's commercial on the ground plane and then it's 3 or 4 stories of residential above. You really see it in Berlin. I mean, it's just street after street or like Wunderf. So the street is sort of, it's a thoroughfare, but it's also open space for residents. So it's got this very ambiguous kind of character, whether it's a garden and whether it's a public space or whether it's actually a vehicular throughway. And I don't think we have that on Midland Avenue, you know. We've got ski boats hauling, you know, through there in the middle of the summer, and it's you know, and I think I really applaud a lot of these ideas about traffic calming and slowing them down and making people respect the fact that, you know, this is a little town center here. It's not a freeway, and people haven't quite gotten that yet. You know, they kind of rip around the corner in front of the bank and step on it. You know, it's really a problem for us in the summertime. So, but I don't know, just as a philosophical overview, it just feels like, and then linear is too much of a sort of respect for the vehicle. And, you know, that's the other extreme, which is it's not a street for people. That's a street for really managing traffic counts or something. And I don't know, my sort of take on all this is that the room scheme seems to contain more things that fit Basalt better than others. And it's just, you know, notionally, that's it just feels really comfortable. So those wider sidewalks, the trellis lighting, I guess I'm going to go here. The idea of, you know, having timed, angled reserved parking for deliveries just strikes me. I mean, I'd love to talk to the folks that are running businesses and talk to Heather and, you know, Greg and these guys and see how it would work for them. But it just seems so sensible. I mean, that's, you know, and we can, Vail has scheduled delivery times. Everything has to be there by noon. And, you know, so that's just a great idea. I just think we can get those cars out, those trucks out of the middle of the street. It's really a great idea. So, you know, the trick here is, you know, this is, you know, we shouldn't be trying to create an illusion by creating a Champs-Élysées or something here that we're going to have this incredibly formal urban street, because that's not the way the town evolved. It was just a dirt track with railroad tracks in it, you know, and then the buildings got plunked down. So now we're trying to say, okay, but now it's 2022, and we got to express our ideas for how this town functions and what are we going to do for the next 100 years. So, you know, funky does not mean that you can't have functional, coherent pedestrian systems and walkways. It doesn't mean that you can't have walkways that don't accumulate water in November and stay there and form skating opportunities in your public walkways for the rest of the winter. We've got pedestrian crossings that terminate in stagnant pools of water for 6-7 months out of the year. So, you know, there is no reason that we can't respect the fun and historical and, you know, the funk that we all like about Basalt, and make it so that it's safe to walk at night and you can find out where you're going, and that it's got some charm, and, you know, that's the trick. So the linear just feels like it's trying to impose a building form or something that was not what this was about. I just think we're really heading down the right track with this rooms idea, where you can, you know, change that angle parking to parallel, buy some more space, the little trellis lighting, all these ideas that you guys have are terrific. So, so that was, you know, I think redesign for parallel parking to create continuous, coherent sidewalks, a very big deal. And I don't underestimate what a sales effort this is going to be with our restaurateurs and folks downtown. You know, we're going to have to work hard on this, and we have to be pretty close in terms of the net, you know, kind of within reasonable walking distance of the town. We need to net out what we're going to get in the way of total parking count. You know, the addition of like more angle parking down by CC's, I think, is in one of the schemes. I'm not sure which one. That looks like a winner. I mean, that takes parking, which is a kind of visual blight, and puts it in an area of town that's not highly trafficked and is not part of the viewscape of the historic downtown. I'm sure the neighbors would love that description, but that's what it is. The temporary delivery space is great. So, at any rate, well, I'll chip in more as we go along. I just thought, you know, we'd been at it for, you know, 40 minutes, so it's a good idea to start giving you some, so you don't just talk straight for an hour and a half without getting some dialogue on here. So there's some initial impressions.
Yep. So one of the reasons that we're kind of pulling some of the pieces apart, and I guess kind of in response, Bill, to what you were sharing, is, you know, Woonarf interestingly has the widest travel lanes, right? Versus like Rooms has the narrowest. So in terms of some of that mix and match, right? It might seem like, you know,
jump in.
You know, like linear, it embraces the car, but you're responding to that because of the parking. So that's where I think take some of your comments and then really drilling them down, right? Does narrower lanes, and we're not going crazy, right? It's like 11, 11 half, and 12 or something like that. But so keep going on that path, and the more you can look at it in really distinct pieces for us, the better. And hopefully this kind of helps, you know, as you maybe flip through that differentiator matrix.
To that end, I really like the idea of kind of mixing the plan elements. But I think versus it being uniform, having some planters, some grade to the extent that, you know, we don't damage plants and it's like it's practical. But I like the planters, even the hanging baskets in places. I think the tree grates could be cool too in places also. We're gonna get just really specific about this stuff. And then same with the lighting. Having a mixture of lighting where it's complementary but different, I think would be cool, just to make kind of a variety of texture is how I think of it. And that's probably later on with materials and stuff too. I thought something about the decking, which is pretty cool. So having that variety of stamped concrete, the decking, but tying it all together thematically, or I don't know if that's the right word, or tying it all together just so it's complementary, but has that variety and has that flexibility overall. Because things are the way they are now, but, you know, do we have the flexibility in the future for when people change kind of what the businesses are and what what's out there. I think that's important too, is from a kind of more a high-level perspective.
That's a great point.
I agree with Bill that the linear plan isn't enough of a departure from what we have now. And I think people are really thirsting for a certain amount of departure. And so I think some blending of Woolnerf and rooms, would do that. I especially liked how in the rooms iteration that you showed vestiges of the boardwalks that used to be there. That was kind of a very cool thing to, remind people of the past materials.
Cool.
The one big one I'll touch on, the roundabout. It's a good idea.
So which one? I mean, we
Roundabout
can
right
bounce
here.
around. So yeah, one of your
Right
sheets.
here, having a roundabout in this intersection
Okay.
is like, to me, we've got to do that.
Okay.
That's being very specific.
And then love some feedback at the top of Midland. So at Riverside, we basically did a small vehicle. We shouldn't use the word roundabout. I'm not sure, Stephanie, what the right word is.
Turnaround is what it's in here, and that's a good idea too.
Yeah. So if some of you are familiar, up in Snowmass, they did it as you come down Snowmelt, right, and you meet. I forget what. So a small vehicle can just drive over it, or you can use around it. But so it's not meant for a truck to get to the top of Midland and go around, or a fire truck or anything. But it's meant for if there's still some angled parking, or if I went by and there was no parallel parking, like I'm kind of trying to find my space. I'm cruising the street. I go up. I can in my small vehicle make a legal turn around, and you can't do that right now. You're doing it fully illegally, basically a U-turn by the barber shop kind of thing. So that was the other one we'd love feedback on.
I think
Not
that's
just
a,
around
I think
this.
it's a great idea.
yeah.
It is a good idea, except the one in Snowmass, when the street's dirty, you can't even tell it's there.
Yeah.
So it's like, so people just blast over it, and some people know it's there and go around, and it's just confusing.
Which you can. I mean, it's kind of meant to like blast over it if you want to.
Yeah.
Like that's actually the point. But yeah, we could look at more sort of vertical
Yeah,
elements.
just so
to that
you know, at least know why it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be signed and
Yeah.
there'd be some education.
Yeah, like legal.
Because roundabouts are confusing for tourists anyway.
Well,
And so something
Sure.
like that's even more confusing.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah. I'll just drive over it. Yep.
Having something like a calming element coming in, because there's bikes coming down, there's people, on the hill, and having something there so it's not a free-for-all with the turns and you
Yeah.
have some kind of accident.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot happening there. Okay.
I also have a question, and this is a state highway. Does CDOT have something to say about this?
Guess I'll let Stephanie jump in. I mean, they're sort of one of our review entities.
It's not.
It's not.
It's
Why
not a state
highway.
Just county road.
On Two Rivers Road? Or at the
Two
intersection?
Rivers Road is no longer a state highway.
Yeah.
That's Stephanie.
Yes.
It's conveyed from CDOT.
So it's not.
Two Rivers Road is no longer a state highway.
So Two Rivers isn't, Midland isn't.
Oh, great.
It's a county road.
It's a county road.
And we've met with both Eagle County and Pitkin County Public Works because they both use it to access their counties up the frying pan. So we've met with those guys.
That's great, because Eagle County's a lot easier to deal with than CDOT.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, they're just giving us a lot of use feedback, right? They don't really have a review say necessarily.
So I didn't want to derail you. I want to get you to keep going, but I want to.
No, that's okay. I mean, we're kind of working our way. So the next one was sidewalk dining and materials. Go to the next slide.
We may
And
look
so-
like stuffed animals up here, but we actually are not.
I'd say just, I would have, yeah, no. You're our Jedi, Bill. So sidewalk dining and materials, we already heard a little bit, but, so like interestingly, Bill characterized the rooms. Yep, absolutely, they are the widest sidewalk profile of all the options. And the Woonerf, interestingly, is one of the narrowest sidewalk profiles. So while you are turning that kind of whole realm into like pedestrian permeability between building face to building face, the true like sidewalk realm of the Woonerf is one of the narrowest. So just sort of love some feedback on that. Obviously, as you see later, we're making trade-offs in lane widths and type of parking by having the rooms, as wide as they are. A couple different versions of our loading zones, like the temporary loading zone idea, that can either transition to parking. It could be temporary loading from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then turn into outdoor dining. And then, you know, you can transition loading with, or outdoor dining with snow storage and loading zones with parking. So 6 to 10, it could be loading and then it's parking after. So those are kind of some of the, like, pick the apple you like. We got a little bit of feedback so far about materials, so anything on this page?
Yeah, most of the
Great.
food and beverage guys arrive in the morning, and then the big freight deliverers are in the afternoon. So UPS, FedEx, and all the big trucks are afternoon deliveries, and Seattle Seafood and, you know, Noble and the rest of the Shamrock, they're morning guys.
Pretty
so
morning.
it's
So
gotta be-
here's some really interesting feedback, and I hope we reach a different point. Some of our restaurateurs had a lot more control pre-COVID, and they've lost some of that control. So out of COVID and major shortages for the delivery folks, they're basically coming whenever they can. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys are kind of fully aware of that. Like, I think we can get back to where this was. And again, just sort of thinking about we're designing for the future, but we probably need some kind of resiliency in here so that it's like, if it stays the way it is right now for another couple years or something like that, or something happens and you end up with these supply chain issues, a lot of this control becomes a little bit harder. So just kind of bearing that in mind. But you're absolutely right. And technology right now is kind of helping this along, right? I go on the booking app, I know when the loading zone time is there, et cetera. So you're not just strictly relying on signage or enforcement.
I like some of the, kind of the asymmetry in I guess it's rooms it has it, but with the northern sidewalk is, with the southerly aspect is bigger, you're using more of that space because it's got that, you know, the sun and everything. And then
Sure.
the other side going uphill with the bike lane, because you're inevitably going to be a little slower and make things a little more, traffic flow standpoint, a little nicer for the bikes to, you know, not be in the traffic essentially. I think those are nice attributes.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So only one option has a true dedicated bike lane, and that's exactly right. It's on the uphill side. You know, when you're not able to, I'm not, some people probably are, able to keep up with the traffic at 20 miles an hour. And then you don't put one on the downhill side. It's much easier to kind of keep with the flow of traffic.
But it'd be painted for shared bike and vehicular lane.
Not in, not in
There's the Sharrow
not in rooms.
on one, and then there's the dedicated on the other, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the Sharrows are the one, in one option, there's a dedicated uphill. And then there's a lane, you know, next to it. In the other two options, it would be, do you do Sharrows, that it's just a shared street? Do you do nothing? You know, and it's regular Colorado law, which is share the road. Okay?
We've had a challenge in, this is one of the sort of less kind of romantic aspects of the design exercise here, though. We have a phenomenon here where, you know, we've got a crowned street section. So that travel lane gets worn and does get solar exposure, so we get freeze thaw and we get melting, and water migrates to the north and collects in all of our angled parking in front of all the businesses on the north side of the street. And, you know, by about January 14th, we've got about 4 to 5 inches of impenetrable black ice, which welds to the ground. If you saw what we had to do this winter, Ryan, we bought excavators in, we borrowed from Pitkin County with the little excavator, you know, the demo chisel points, trying to break this ice up. I don't know what we do about that, whether there's anything from when we get into Catherine and storm drainage design, whether we can mitigate that somehow, whether this is just going to be an operating procedure where we got to get those cars off the street and have a crew at night. Because I just think it's got to be a lot cheaper to push that snow out of there before it turns into glacial ice out there, which has only been going on for 65 years, and Basalt is not a new problem. But
So it happens every year.
I know, but that
Well,
doesn't mean
yeah.
it's, we gotta accept
Some
it.
weather extremes are actually making it worse. So you used to have consistent snow and it would, you wouldn't get as much ice buildup. That's related to a lot of the freeze thaw that we have right now because we get such extremes in the winter that we didn't previously. So it is actually kind of getting worse. Well, so playing around, we put some innovation up there about, can some of these collection points actually have some of that sort of geothermal snow melt, right? And you're collecting there and you're trying to kind of draw that down. Woo Nerf drains to the middle, changes the whole sort of scenario of how we're moving water, and that, would affect summer and winter, so.
And are you
Kind of
planning on
interesting
having
thought.
like storm drain that goes and collects in the middle?
Yeah, yep, so some of it on the surface, some of it might kind of grab it, put it into some of those planters, et cetera, and kind of, because we can't put everything underground, where it daylights, the math doesn't work, so much of Midland will still have to stay on the surface, no matter what. And so two options keeps it kind of to the edges, and we figure out some of those other solutions. One says, change the whole equation, start kind of tipping everything to the middle of this cross-section.
And then you'd have snow storage on top of that.
That's correct.
So it would actually
Not
be-
entirely, but yes,
Well,
some
but I
of the
mean,
middle.
to a certain extent, it would be actually hidden under the snow
Yep,
instead of exposed. at the
and
edges.
not in your shadiest zones. I mean, that's what's happening, is it's going into this freeze thaw, and it's in the area that literally gets, maybe an hour of morning sun, if you're lucky. Okay? So someone brought up Midland Spur, so let's go to our next slide. So we'd love a little bit of feedback here. Two of our options turn Midland back into a one-way. We have basically one-way leaving town, and angled parking on both sides. So that's our rooms here. So you would one-way down Midland Spur, and there's parking on both sides, so it effectively is able to add parking. Our linear maintains what's out here in terms of traffic flow, but tries to kind of reorganize the parking to get angled parking, both ways, and that allows us to add some. It's not a ton, but it's a little bit. And then I think Woo Nerf looks a lot like the first one, it adds parking. And then, in feedback on this slide, so Merino Park, which is at the end of Midland Spur, we have a couple different ideas for that. So in the rooms option, it has a lot of different things going on. So in the summertime, we can add some parking to that. We've got a big bike corral here. In the wintertime, this would basically be snow storage. So some of the scoop and move that we have to do on Midland, you're not going too far, you're able to kind of stack it up down here in the parking. This option rooms, we're also starting to use the triangle, use Lions Park here, and just sort of this triangle feature, kind of playing with this idea of adding some overflow parking. And so that might be just gravel, it could actually be like a little bit of a patio for the stage, but then parking, it could be part of the Sunday market is kind of in there, so just, like, how can we reuse this space a little bit better? Again, too, linear is looking at Merino Park pretty much as just stormwater, so a lot of what we're conveying on the surface here ends up somewhat on the surface and then underground, and is daylighting here before it goes under two rivers and into the wetlands, is filtered, and then ultimately into the river. And then 3, Merino, there's no changes, which is kind of hangs out there, and it serves ad hoc as parking. So any thoughts on that would be?
I like the idea on rooms of like, whether that, how you make it look, but having the parking here, because we're gonna have a good park. We're gonna have events, and we're not gonna have enough parking for how many people are gonna want to attend that event. I mean, to me, that's a really, really good idea. At the end of the day, I think you're gonna have a combination of all of this, but all 3 of these guys are.
Okay.
As far as the bikes, it made me think of it from earlier. I think having them throughout, the infrastructure for putting bikes throughout probably makes a lot of sense, because if otherwise, people will probably be like just leaning against planters, and they'll be just kind of around versus, on a, kind of like when you go to Denver and there's the Lime bike on the side. You don't want something like that. You want things to kind of be in little spots and places. I also, so as far as the Midland spur though, I don't know what the traffic studies would say, but it seems like intuitively like having that one way would make the flow a lot better around town. You're not gonna have people trying to come out up to the intersection over there, and it's just gonna flow a little better, I would think, but I don't know if that's what the traffic study would say too. I don't know if that data is even available, but.
What? I'm just curious why the angled parking is out of town rather than going into town. Was there a reason behind that?
On the one way?
On the spur, yeah.
Well, just because we made the flow of traffic out of town, and so we put it, but, I mean, that's part of the discussion. You could flip-flop it around.
Yeah.
Often, I think, because people want to park at their destination, they tend to drive Midland and can't find a space right in front of Tempranillo, Brick Pony, whatever. You're going to circulate up to the small turnaround. You're going to come back down, and the last place you're going to go is to park in front of Town Hall to go, eat at the Brick Pony. So
I think having this as the one way is coming this way is a good idea, because I've seen so many near misses of people trying to go left or right out of here. It's just a very weird turn, so I think that's the way to do it.
And that was our other piece, was the safety of
There's a double stop sign.
There's a lot going on right there.
There's a lot going on.
There's a double stop sign, and I think the prevailing belief for Basalt teens is that, hey, I stopped at one of those stop signs. I don't have to stop at
I don't need to stop at the next one.
They gun out. And I kind of
Forget
sympathize
it.
with them.
Yep. So, yeah, so just sort of natural pattern to find parking, that intersection, how to kind of increase the safety, make it more pedestrian oriented.
Yeah.
A few different ideas of why you'd sort of make this the exit versus the entrance.
So have you done any sort of first pass at parking count in terms of what these various schemes produce?
So on the differentiator, the front one that has no images on it, but this guy,
Yeah.
okay?
It's
Now,
in there.
again, that parking, let's see, could you flip to maybe the next slide, James? So just one that has the entire, okay. So that parking count that you have there is the parking count of, it includes this little section of Midland, all the way up to Riverside, and then the spur. That's the parking count that's on that sheet.
Okay.
So it's got nothing from the school, it's not, we didn't even do
It's
Two
just-
Rivers.
But it's
It really
apples
is like,
to
what are we
apples.
touching?
You could do existing and then kind of compare.
We can do whatever you want, like I would just say you guys should give us a pretty,
There we go.
you guys should give us the definition of where you want to run whatever parking.
Got it.
Right, because we're obviously not touching any of this. So we can go ahead and like get the parking count along all of Two Rivers or something like that. It just, we'd want to know, I want you to do it from the Conservancy, to the bridge, whatever. And then do you want us to like add in elementary? I think what it does is the delta of what we might be like losing is a smaller percentage if we're losing some, right? So if we say we're going to go from this to this. I think the reason we picked these boundaries were just because it really correlated to that 1,000 foot. And, so within that 1,000 foot, for the most part, right? Again, you could say like some of this is in the 1,000 foot, but what was the delta? But we can certainly maybe even just create a separate line that says how much is parking along Two Rivers and, just how much do you have overall, I guess.
Yeah.
We're happy to do that.
So a comment on the Spur Merino Park thing, sorry.
Please.
Is there a need for like the two exits? You know what I mean? Like if you come down here, you exit here and you exit here, can't it just be one kind of almost big parking spot with a proper exit and then this is functional space then?
That's a great question. So you're pretty much asking about this and then this, and how to almost kind of change and rethink
Yeah, people will
Inlet
be
spur in general.
pulling in there, so, because it's one way.
Yep.
And if you make one proper exit, you do free up some space for additional usage there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's something like Cushing Terrell and Stephanie can kind of weigh into. You know, we just want to look at all the site distances and whatnot, but, yes, certainly seems like a viable idea, for sure.
Yeah.
But then we lose snow storage, right?
I mean, not necessarily.
Could still use it as, used spaces as snow storage.
Parking spaces.
I mean, you can also get rid of, you can leave this, but dead end Merino Park. So it's sort of head in, pull out kind of thing. So we would look maybe at which exit it made sense to like get rid of, so they're not duplicated. Either one, getting rid of either one, you'd gain like space and some parking and, yeah.
Out of curiosity with the stormwater, there, if we don't do stormwater, where's that water go? I mean, like, is that, we have to account for that somewhere?
Well, we're not increasing the stormwater, and really right now it actually flows kind of into a bit of a ditch space right here, right, Stephanie? Feel free to jump in.
Right.
Yeah, right here, and then goes, you know, back under. So this needs to maybe be cleaned up, both like space for stormwater and aesthetically.
But we wouldn't even have to.
So
consider it, really, right? It'd be-
One of the downfalls of Midland right now is it does not have storm infrastructure. It has very minimal storm infrastructure. As you know, in front of Town Hall, you've got that funky deep valley pan at the northeast corner of Town Hall that collects from an inlet that's across Midland Avenue. And that's really one of the only inlets that's on Midland Avenue, and it collects that drainage and routes it in the valley pan along the north side of Town Hall, as I believe Heather was showing you guys, to the west side of Merino Park, of the park, and then it goes into drainage infrastructure in Merino Park that daylights into the ditch on the north side of Merino Park. So there's not great storm infrastructure on Midland Avenue, so that's going to be one of the big challenges we have with this project, how to deal with it appropriately and with what's available to us.
So I guess the question behind the question is like, if we have to do something with stormwater, then tell us. Otherwise, we'd rather probably use that space for something besides stormwater, you know?
Yeah, like on this sheet, when you look at the linear option, I think it was almost more kind of make this into some open space, you know, softscape, get the stormwater into there. But it's not as though that was sized to like, that's what we're gonna need.
Okay.
So that's a great response.
Okay.
Yep, if we don't need that, let's use it for something else.
Yeah.
Yep, awesome.
We're running low on time, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to give you guys encouragement. I think I'm going to the differentiator diagram, and probably one of the more difficult choices here is what to do, or maybe what the hell to do, with our sidewalk system on the south side of the street, which is kind of changes heading, you know, compass bearings about 5 or 6 times before you get from one end of town to the next. I think this one, all 3 of them are good, but the one for rooms and shows great courage. I mean, to basically get the sidewalk lined up. You know, we're crashing into some existing parking. We're going to change head-in parking to some parallel parking from, if I read the diagram correctly. I would really encourage you to keep on that track. I think, you know, it's not your job to worry about the political ramifications of some of these, which are pretty significant, but, you know, that's our job. But I think these are very good ideas. I think you're really on the right track. I think solving for this delivery issue and the human safety aspect of it, and you know, it's for the deliveries, for the parking count, for the walkway system for what we're gonna do with lighting, and signage and wayfinding. This is just a vast bunch of improvements, you know, we're gonna get into it, obviously in more detail, but, that's sort of my take. I think, that's something we shouldn't shy away from, if you think that's the right conclusion.
And any fatal flaws? I mean, anything that you guys have seen in terms of this kind of buffet of ideas that shouldn't go any further?
I'm not a fan of the center lane, but that's just me.
General, guys out in the public, Ted, do you have, anybody in the public want to comment about what they've seen here? And go ahead.
I like the buffet concept. I like, maybe, the only thing I like is one of is to put the storm drainage in the center, and perhaps to do 2 or 3 designated spots in there, which is your delivery spots. I don't think the sidewalks need to be as wide. I think the streets need to be at least 12 feet. Because, as you said, we've got a lot of vehicles, big boats and stuff going right through our downtown. So I think that, and I think the themes, the thing that concerns me is this feels very urban, and it's not small town. And everything about Basalt, since long before I was there, is this is a small town. We want to maintain our small town character. So I think we need to really pay attention to that.
All right, thank you. Anyone else out there? Comments? All right, we're going to thank you for, you know, this is to be continued, but unfortunately, we've got to stuff our faces and then start a public hearing.
I think the benefit of probably this packet you have in front of you, and then we'll make sure you have the electronic version, would be to, if you'd like, you know, engage with it after this, circle some things, make some notes, you know, this idea of the buffet. I like this here. Maybe you just use the one page that's the differentiator, right? And then getting that back to Catherine.
Will there be a survey follow-up?
So for you guys, I mean, so the survey, as mentioned previously, we're doing an online survey that launches concurrent with Motors on Midland. And it's gonna look a lot like this, where we're not asking the public, I love all of Wooner. I love all of Linear. They're more literally gonna get like this on the online survey. I like this piece here, this piece here, this piece here. So that
Never met a buffet I didn't like. That's
exactly. This was so much to digest, you guys. I really appreciate the time.
You're off to a great start. This is great stuff, and I think particularly if you keep your eye on that distant star, this is, you know, for the next 100 years, you know, we've had the first 100. What's the future going to look like here? And,
yeah, right on. Cool, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you guys.
Who has Catherine's contact?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Basalt Town Council meeting for Tuesday, May 10, 2022. So with that, I would ask our town clerk to call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Angela Anderson. Here. Glenn Drummond.
Here.
David Knight.
Here.
Elise Huddle.
Present.
Ryan Slack.
Here.
Bill Kane.
Here.
And Dieter Schindler.
Here.
The A-team is present. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. So first order of business tonight is our consent agenda. It consists of 3 elements. First are minutes from our April 26th meeting. The second element is a special event activity permit for Ride the Rockies, a very fun deal, for June 13th. And the third is a special event activity permit for the Basalt Half Marathon. If there are if any counselor would like to bring any of those off of consent for further discussion, we may do that. If not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. The consent agenda is hereby approved. So, and our next order of business is a call to the public. And I will remind you, if you're out there and you're watching this town council meeting and you would like to participate virtually at our meeting and address council, you can access the town council meeting at www.basalt.net under Agendas and Minutes tab. Click on the May 10 meeting to open it. And on the meeting access instruction page, click on the link to join the webinar. Just join. So, and we're going to probably proceed, but we will remain flexible if people may take a little while to work your way through the process if you are trying to connect on. So, with that, I don't think we have public in public here to comment. So I will move on and open the floor for our next item, which is mayor and council reports and comments. Councilor Elise?
I just want to say a huge thank you to Dieter for joining the Finance Committee for Court and to David for taking over CC4CA.
Oh, great. Thanks. Good going, guys. Thank you.
I'd like to give a big kudos to Public Works. I know after this windstorm, I saw them all over town, cutting up trees, getting stuff moved, super quick. It was awesome. Awesome to see the quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Great. Public greatly appreciates it.
Support that as well. So, great. I know we approved this activity permit. Ride the Rockies is going to be a pretty neat event for town, June 13th. I've done it a few times myself. I don't know what the ride route is, where they're coming from to get to Basalt, whether they're in.
Yeah, so that day they're coming to Basalt on the 13th is a Monday. They will be leaving Glenwood Springs.
Oh, okay.
It's a pretty short day.
That
the
is a
next
short
day
day.
they're headed to Salida up over Indy Pass, so that's like 113 miles or something. But this day they didn't want to make it too short and just put them on the Rio Grande, so they'll actually head up toward CMC and take a route through Missouri Heights, end up coming back down, I think via the Elgibel Hill, and then they'll cross under the underpass, and then make their way through Willits on the bike lane, and then up over to, and then Rio Grande by the high school, and then underpass into town. So.
Oh, wow, fantastic. Yeah, I did it, did the ride, and we went from Aspen to Leadville over Independence Pass. And I remember getting to the summit, I thought, that's the last time I'm ever doing that ride.
And then it's still uphill to Leadville from there, so.
Very tough hill. Okay, so with that, we will open the discussion for the manager's report.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was just going to caveat that for tonight I have a presentation in my manager's report, and if I seem a little punchy, I am. I spent the night with 40 fifth graders last night camping for outdoor ed, so that was a lot of fun. But I put in here, just finished up our accomplishments for 2021, and just wanted to make sure I got that into the packet. So that basically takes our work plan for each year, and I work with the department heads and town staff just to get some feedback on those tasks that you all asked us to work on in a given year. So this just kind of reports out on that, and that is all in here, and I think the staff did an excellent job following through on the great majority of items that are in here. Many are ongoing, just things that we'll continually do, and some are, accomplish it and move on to the next. So anyway, thank you to staff for that. And then just a quick report out for any of you that maybe got a phone call. I know Ryan did. Our pool had overflowed twice this last weekend. There is a sensor that keeps the pool level constant, and that had malfunctioned, I think, on Friday. They got it fixed, or so they thought, and then again on Sunday it was overflowing again, so they were back out there, and I think they believe they have it fixed temporarily here, but it's going to need to get a contractor back in here to kind of remedy the problem on a more permanent basis. So just in case you get phone calls on that, we are on top of that. And otherwise, I think that's it for now.
Great. Hey, on the accomplishments, I kind of scanned through. I was looking for our Basalt Connect. I couldn't find it.
Well, Basalt Connect started in 2022. So you'll find that in 2022's accomplishments.
If you were shrewd, you would actually claim it in both years.
Right. Sometimes that happens, but.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
I'll take that advice.
Good, or that'll get in there somewhere.
Brian, when is the nonprofit grant cycle again?
For the tobacco tax or for just the?
Just the general one.
Oh, okay, so that'll be in the fall. So we do it every year.
Okay.
In the fall.
I got those confused.
Yeah, and then I think we met last November, and then we inform folks and then cut checks in January.
Okay, so the round that's happening now, that's tobacco tax.
That's tobacco tax.
Can only be for mental health related nonprofits, correct?
No. So there's it has to mitigate for mental health or for tobacco related cessation or prevention or for alcohol, drugs, that kind of thing. So what we have, like what we did last year, we had I think 10 or so different nonprofits apply. A lot of those nonprofits are associated with schools, for example, so after school programs and things like that, where you kind of have those hours from when school lets out to when parents get home, that kids are staying occupied with school programs and things like that. I think the studies that they cite when they apply to us say that when those kids are occupied and they're not otherwise without constructive things to do, that's when you get issues come up with experimentation and that kind of thing. So that's where we've this council has made that interpretation of, that's an appropriate use of this money. Others are very directly related to, like what you say, with Hope Center or Response or places like that have sort of a more linear tie to the.
Okay,
to that.
gotcha. And then what's the cycle for that one?
So that that ended on the 22nd of April.
Okay.
And then we're reviewing that with the Vail Board next Monday. And then that'll be a recommendation to council, I think at the second meeting in May.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any questions, Ryan, before we move on? Great. So next portion of our meeting will be council actions. So the first order of business for tonight.
We got a presentation.
Oh, sorry, Basalt forward. Wow. I should have. I'm sorry.
Fine. Ryan, would you like to start with this one, or?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and kick off, and this really is a presentation to just let council know and let the public know where we are with Basalt Forward. And I was going to focus a little more specifically on the Midland Avenue Streetscape project. But Christy will talk a little bit about an overall budget that she's put together that's going to be a budget that you'll get really familiar with throughout the next 3 years, basically, of when we're making these improvements in the town. And it's going to be, basically expenses versus budget, and just an ability to keep you and the public informed as to where we are with these funds that came from the bonds. So I was going to just give a little bit of background on sort of how we got here. As you recall, last summer the council had provided direction to start implementation of the 2020 master plan. We also undertook a facility needs study and put together a program of basically trying to ask a question to the public after assembling a group of citizens from our citizen committees which that was a capital needs committee, and asked the question of what are your priorities? What do we want to do first? Because there was a list of like 13 projects coming out of the master plan, and then several coming from the facility needs study. We went through that process, and then the three projects had emerged. So that was doing the green projects, affordable housing, and Midland Avenue streetscape. And we went to the voters and posed the question to them if they would like to continue that same mill levy. So it wasn't raising taxes, but they were able to keep that same mill levy in place, and we could get dollars to do some of these new improvements. Turned out to be really, really good timing from the standpoint of the market, and the interest rates on those were quite low, and so we ended up benefiting to the tune of about $365,000 or so that we were able to put back into the Midland Avenue streetscape budget ultimately, because that was on the non-taxable funds. And one of the other things that we were doing throughout this process were some concept designs. So we had done a concept design as part of the facility needs with Cushing Terrell, and costed that at the time. That came in at around $11.5 million. We knew for Midland, as we kind of divvied up the funds and priorities, we'd have about $9 million. So all along we were discussing, well, how do we make up for that shortfall? And we proposed, grant funds, and I'll talk about those in a minute, and using some of our unrestricted fund balance, as that was favorable. I think it's important to note that the unrestricted fund balance is different than our fund balance that we hold back for more rainy day operational use if there's a recession, or we kind of went through an exercise when the pandemic hit. Didn't have to use any of it, but nonetheless we have it there. So these unrestricted funds are really coming from the favorable years that we've had, and conservative budgeting that we've done. So we have some money set aside to be able to use in the future for capital improvements and reinvesting in the community. And so fast forward a little bit, we did get the Arpa funding, $1 million for that. So that was the American Recovery Plan Act, I believe it is. And so we've set that aside for some of the deep utility work that we know we'll do as part of the Midland project. We've also applied for a CDOT grant, so a revitalization grant for main streets that they have. We are expecting to hear on that later this week. So we did get some word that we were finalist on that, so that's looking pretty good for us, and that was for another $1 million. We believe that because we have these bond funds that we're putting forward, we added some additional funds as matching money to just make this grant application as competitive as possible. So we're hopeful that'll come out in our favor. And as I mentioned, kind of where we are now, we've created this budget report that Chrissy's going to share with you, and that'll be kind of what we use to update everybody from that fiscal standpoint throughout the budget. And we've also, now that we've as you saw tonight, we had issued back in January a request for proposals for a design team. So that design team is now in place for the Midland Avenue streetscape project. We heard from them earlier tonight on some different thought concepts on what that project might look like. But as we were sort of getting into the design phase, we also had some discussions with our design team, meaning the engineers who will ultimately be designing and helping oversee construction. We've also spoken with the landscape architects and then our owner's rep. And so we kind of have our budget, that $11.5 million broken into soft costs and hard costs, just to kind of keep things simple. And and of course, the hard costs we don't know yet because we're only at that conceptual phase. The soft costs, we're starting to get a little bit of a picture there because we have a fixed contract, a fixed price on the design side of it, but then started to look at, well, where do we go once we get into the construction side of it? And so right now, I think the punchline is that we're a bit over where we anticipated on the soft costs. Some of that comes from the fact that we've added an owner's rep in here, so that's a bit of an added cost, and we're trying to figure out, well, what is the appropriate role for an owner's rep? What's the appropriate role for the engineers? And then staff. Of course, we have a staff engineer at this point that will be able to help out too. So the total shortfall that we're looking at right now is about $834,000. And how might we make that up throughout this process? So we're continually refining. I think as we move into the hard cost phase of this, that number of the soft cost will shift. The good news for us is that we've chosen this process, the CMGC, so Construction Manager General Contractor, and we are going to be getting cost estimates at the 30, 60, and 90% design phases. So we're going to kind of go into this hard cost phase with eyes wide open. So that's a good thing. We also anticipate that this contractor will do the 100% construction drawings, and they're going to give us a guaranteed maximum price. So once we get to the phase of actually building, we're going to have a really good idea of what we're paying for those hard costs. It's not as much of a moving target for us, which is pretty important given that we have sort of a fixed budget. The other side to this too is we're going to be doing construction over the next 3 years, or within this project for 3 years. 2 years of that will be construction in 2023 and 2024. So that cost is going to be spread out over 2 more budget cycles after this year. And we'll also continue to look for other funding sources. So if there are other grants that come up that would be able to help us with that, we'll certainly do it. But we do have the monies that we set aside in the unrestricted, and so we had anticipated needing to use some of that for this project. So we don't have to budget for it now, but we just want to make sure that everybody's kind of aware of where we are with those costs. The other piece to this is, we're doing this much work up front, so it's early in the process. So it's helpful for us to identify these things now versus later, where we're kind of scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. So really wanting to just be cognizant at every step on this project with you all. I think that's kind of all I had to say about the Midland side of things. Christy, anything I might have missed on that?
No, I think that's good. The only thing I would add on Midland, that's really important. I mean, we're looking at, cost increases that we've seen over the last year in construction, and just to be conservative, we're keeping a 30% contingency on our construction costs, and then about an 8% contingency on our soft costs, even though we know most of our soft costs. This is a pretty hands-on project. So that's part of that upfront approach that Ryan was talking about, is just making sure that we have that, some reasonable assurance there, since a lot of this is underground too, and the cost variation we may see in construction.
So that was about $2.5 million total in contingency for the project.
Correct. Yep. And then, did you want me to go on to the report side?
Yeah. Any questions from council, and then we can.
No, I think it's great. I mean, I think it's a budgeting process that I think a lot of us have had maybe sidebar conversations that, we anticipate that there will be some value engineering phase to to a project of this magnitude. And it looks like you've structured a budgeting process here that will allow us to get to key points, and then, you know, we can get council to weigh in on, you know, how we can save on costs and still deliver, you know, the objectives for the project. So, you know, I
Can we
think.
not call it the value engineering though, because that sounds like a dirty word.
It's, it's something what?
Value engineering is sort of a dirty word.
Yeah.
What's
We're
the
gonna look at
alternative?
opportunities.
Opportunities, okay. We'll remember that.
Yeah. We'll be looking at opportunities to spend wisely.
So
Okay.
Dave? Quick question. So for the 30, 60, 90, it sounds, that's kind of like an interval to kind of keep checking back in during the design phase, and so that we get to that guaranteed maximum price. And then we have kind of a clear line of sight, but staying close, I think, in those monthly intervals as we get to that point is going to be critical. So thank you for doing that. I think that's going to be good.
Yeah, I think that lets council sort of have a predictable outcome as far as those hard costs. And then you can, I think it just helps with your decision making. So these opportunities that we might come up with a design, ultimately, you know, I think that you come up with something that you know you can pay for, but then also you all get to make those decisions in the process of, you know, what's the best for the community as far as that.
So
design.
we have bond proceeds, we've got grant monies, and then we have our general fund contribution. So we'll keep moving forward with the project, keep evaluating these costs, and then see how successful we are with the grant. And so we don't have do we have a number? Well, I mean, I know they told us maybe we would qualify for 500,000 for sure, but they didn't bite for the million.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's competitive,
Yeah.
and they have a lot of applicants this year, and so they were asking, well, you know, would $500,000 still get you across the finish line? And, you know, I think for us, it challenges the scope of the project, and so we were real honest with them about it, and just also, you know, kind of reiterated our strategy on this wasn't to go in and ask for the maximum of $2 million, but to really ask for what we needed. And the fact that we're bringing forward, you know, about 93% of the funds, I think it was, you know, with $9 million in bond proceeds plus another $465,000 in matching funds, that, you know, we feel like we've put forth our best foot. And so we'll hear back Friday and see if they think we have.
Alrighty, thank you.
Yeah.
But there's also other opportunities for more grants throughout this cycle of 3 years, right? Like,
That's what we're hoping, and we are working with a grant writer, and so they're, you know, helping us to identify different opportunities that are out there. So we're going to keep our eyes open and be able to react pretty quickly. Sometimes these things have a short fuse, and that's just how it goes. So we want to be able to jump on it as quickly as possible.
Good deal.
Kind of related to that, I just thought of this, with the Tabor refund stuff going on, do you think that might generate some additional opportunity, and just out of curiosity?
I don't know. I can't say. I just haven't looked at it closely enough. I don't know if you've.
Good.
I think the state was doing some Tabor refunds.
Was just going to individuals.
Oh.
There's
I don't
still
know
more
that-
that has to come in
Yeah.
statute later, and they're doing things differently now, so I don't know if
Yeah, I don't know.
if an opportunity might present later on.
It could, but I don't know enough at this moment, so
Yeah.
we'll keep our eyes up for that.
So Governor Paulus wisely is delaying the timing of the checks to just a couple of weeks before the election. That's just
Peculiar.
he's actually fast forwarding it.
What's that?
Okay.
He's actually putting it before the election. They're supposed to come after the election.
Oh.
It's even a bigger power move.
Did you want me to go through the report really quick? No?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably so.
Okay,
Thanks.
just
Yeah.
really quickly. So just from a process standpoint, I just wanted to give the council a reassurance that we've really looked at our process. We work through these numbers with Phil Vaughn, Construction Management, Inc., as well as Catherine, Christoph, and myself. And we look at all the budgetary numbers on a regular basis. We talk about those, and we actually do a full reconciliation monthly, and then we do a quarterly report out to council. So this presentation style that you see in here was actually reviewed by the Finance Advisory Board, and they made some tweaks and recommendations, and then brought this final format to you with the numbers. So we've really thought thoroughly about this, because this is, I mean, obviously a project that you just want to keep your thumb on at all times when it comes to costs, because there's just a lot of things, that are unknown sometimes with these kind of projects, and just want to make sure we've got the whole team talking about it. So if you go to the second page of the report, so that would be 2 up from there, yeah. It outlines the revenue sources. So then it just clearly pretty much says exactly where revenue is coming from for each one of the projects. And you can see the grants are in there, the bonds, and some of the additional for the favorable interest rates we talked about, an additional potential budget overage, $828,000 that we would take out for the Midland Avenue Streetscape project, so that it gives you the total for the Midland Avenue budget and where that comes from, and then total for the other 2 projects combined, because they're not quite so nuanced as the Midland project is right now. So that's where you get your project cost right now, $20.9 million for all 3 projects. And then if you go to the next page, this one is showing you your budget, and then your total contracts or estimates. So that's like what you're kind of on the hook for versus a budget. You'll note that Midland Avenue, everything is spoken for, so to speak, in that, because we're just really looking at that $6.4 million and keeping that aside for construction specific. But for affordable housing, the only thing that we've really spent on that is the Stotts Mill lot. So you only see $860,000 that's really spoken for out of the $6 million for that particular project so far. And then you have your expenses to date, and then we have some really minor, but we allocate some minor administrative costs that are directly associated with Basalt Forward, only $2,100, so it's pretty minimal. But then you get your total expenses for each one of the projects and your remaining budget. So then that's just how we're going to do that quarterly report. And then on the bottom, it shows you your remaining construction contingency and soft cost contingency specifically for Midland Avenue, because those are really important numbers for council to know, is how much have we dipped into that, as things are going to fluctuate, as you see, with all these different, ideas and concepts, and, as you guys were just talking about today. So it's really good to just keep our thumb on that piece, so, okay.
Great. $1 million, just like that. Great. Thanks, Christy. Any further questions?
What was the 41,000 green projects spent on?
That's probably with McKinstry, the folks that we hired to do the siting, the solar, looking at the suitability of sites, yeah.
Kinski, what's the name?
McKinstry. Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor, I move the town council convene as a local liquor authority.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, we are formally now assembled as the town liquor licensing authority, and we'll take up the first item here, public hearing and review of an application for a new hotel and restaurant liquor license for Jaffa Kitchen LLC, or is it Haifa? I don't know the pronunciation on this guy. Pardon?
Jaffa.
Jaffa, okay.
And this is Alexi?
Right.
Yes.
Alexi, you want to have a seat up here, please? Thank you. You've been working on this application for a couple years. During COVID and everything else, we finally get it.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. How are you guys doing?
Good. Awesome.
They started their deli down there, and it's always busy when I.
Yeah, it's doing good. It's doing good. We have good reviews, and we wanted to improve it, to have it like another glass of beer with the sandwich.
So council and mayor, this is a scheduled public hearing. Staff suggests the local liquor authority hear from staff, thank you, concerning the application, allow the applicant an opportunity to make comments and present their concept and vision for their establishment, take questions and comments from members of the liquor authority, and open the hearing for public comment. The owners, I guess.
Just me.
Just you tonight, okay. So Alexi will be here tonight representing, and they've submitted this application. We have properly posted and noticed the public hearing this evening. And the restaurant is located down near City Market at 400 East Valley Road, Unit G. And the investigating agencies have all been asked for their comments. They have commented. You can see in the memo, the planning department notes that they've not requested outdoor amplified music, therefore it's not included in the approval. If they wish to have outdoor amplified music, it must be approved by the town planner. They've also noted that if there's going to be outdoor seating, the applicant shall maintain at least a 5-foot wide unobstructed path in front of the restaurant for ADA access. Chief Knott has reported he's searched the criminal justice records and has no comments. There's no reason that these gentlemen can't hold a liquor license. Building department has commented that the applicant shall comply with all entity comments and obtain any permits that are necessary for construction. Roaring Fork Fire Rescue has set conditions that they have their fire extinguishers serviced in order to be compliant. Otherwise, they are compliant. Environmental health, they are in good standing with Eagle County Environmental Health. The town clerk had a few conditions, just that we do reserve the right to require an enclosure fencing around any outdoor seating, that the applicant submit any additional materials required by the state for the final approvals. I think we may have some funding and some lease information that we need to update, but we're waiting to hear from the state on that.
Okay.
And the applicant obtain a Basalt business and sales tax license, and that the applicant have they and their staff obtain some responsible serving of alcohol training. And we can help you get in contact with the trainers for that. So the application was sent to the state for concurrent review back in April, and we are at this point, we can make these local findings as required by law, that there's no prior licenses have been denied at this location. The applicant has possession of the property for the term of the liquor license, which is 1 year from the date of approval. No municipal zoning laws prohibit the sale of alcohol. The building on the application is not located within 500 feet of any schools, campus or of college, university, or seminary. The applicants appear to be of good moral character, as evidenced by local, state, and national fingerprint and background checks. And the applicant has circulated a petition seeking comments from the public that have come into the restaurant, and they can have 43 signatures in favor of the issuance of a liquor license at this time. So if the mayor would like to have the applicant make any comments or open for public hearing now.
Yeah, if you'd like to tell us where you are, and then we'll probably open it up to see if there's anybody that wants to call in or make comments. Looks like we have one possible caller, but I don't know if that's relative to this application. But
So, like, what we are? What do you mean by that? Like, what should I tell about the restaurant?
Just your location.
Yeah.
The location is located near the City Market in Isabel, and we serve sandwiches and like daily case pastry and stuff like this, and we want to have the like beverage for people being asking if they can have some for us. So that's where we are.
Right. Okay.
What type of food do you serve?
Middle Eastern. Yeah, it's my partner is from Israel, and he brought all the recipe from his grandmother and put it here.
So is the concept like tap system, cans, bottles?
We'll put tap most on top. And we want to do
Wines?
we do some wines, but in one portion serve, not bottles. And we want to do like drinks, but like kind of margarita that serves and not mix in the house. So we don't have to care to be a bartender over there.
Great. Any other questions from council? This is a public hearing. Anybody that's here publicly is free to address council. Bill Crowley.
He's here for another item.
About that. Pardon?
He's here for another item.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like we have no public comment. So if there are no further questions, I would entertain a motion from council.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the transfer of location for a hotel and restaurant liquor license for Jaffa Kitchen LLC, DBA Jaffa Kitchen, located at 400 East Valley Road, Unit G, Basalt, Colorado, upon satisfactory compliance with the agency's conditions and comments identified in the staff memo dated May 10th, 2022.
Second.
And I
Moved
could-
and seconded, we'd have to call the roll on this one, I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so, but I would like to clarify, it's not a transfer.
Okay,
This is
that's
the
Oh.
issuance of a new liquor license. I probably borrowed that from a previous memo. My apologies.
Approved.
Yes.
Do I need to reread it, Jeffrey?
If you could just say as amended.
As amended
Thank you.
from Pam.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Elise Hoddle,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
and Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations, good luck.
Thanks so much.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I have a
thanks,
question.
Alex.
You mentioned something about the music outside. What do we have to do to get the permission?
We will put you in touch with the planning director.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, next order of business is item 7B, Brick Pony LLC, modification of premises and resolution number 34, series of 2022. Greg, you want to come up? Resolution of the Town Council of Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving a temporary license agreement for the encroachment Midland Avenue for expanded restaurant seating. So, as I understand it, this is pretty much a continuation of the configuration we had last summer.
Past 2 summers.
Pam, do you want to introduce this item?
I can. I've drafted a memo for the council here, talking about the requirements for modification of premises. We've received an application from the Brick Pony PGL LLC, doing business as the Brick Pony Pub. Excuse me. This, if approved, the applicant would be closing 4 parking spaces in front of the Brick Pony Pub to utilize for additional seating, as he's noted, which has been done for the last 2 summers during COVID. In 20 and 21, the state authorized temporary modification permits for additional outdoor seating, and we saw that throughout town and down at Willits as well, to help alleviate some of the stress that restaurants were feeling from COVID. And these temporary permits allowed some licensees to serve alcohol in areas such as parking spaces and sidewalks. The town authorized revocable license agreements with 12 establishments to utilize parking spaces or sidewalk areas. And Greg is here requesting that we reissue that, we reopen that discussion. And I believe that the comments from the investigating agencies are also included with these findings or the requirements from the state for any modification of premise. So for police department, Roaring Fork Fire Rescue, environmental health, and the planning department, building and town clerk have all weighed in on these
Very good.
comments. I can go through them in detail if you want, but they are all written
No, that's fine.
right there. So, and I'd probably ask Jeff and Ryan if they have any comments or want to weigh in.
Yes. So I understand that this was, the original authorization was under some emergency circumstance as a result of the pandemic and impact on local business. And now we would make this permanent or
The,
semi-permanent? Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So during the beginnings of the COVID pandemic, the town council authorized this program to expand restaurant seating and granted the town manager with authority to enter into license agreements to utilize the town's streets and rights of way for expanded restaurant seating. That authority was only effective during the period of our emergency declaration. And so what's in front of you tonight is there's two actions to occur. One is to modify the licensed premises within the liquor license, and the other is to grant, for the town to grant a license to use the town's right-of-way on which to expand that premises. So they're both contingent on each other. The town council is authorized to grant revocable license agreements for into the town right-of-way by resolution. Sometimes this comes up for, licenses can be granted for encroachments or temporary placements, but this is kind of the legal tool to allow for that temporary use of the town street. And so the town council, wearing its liquor licensing authority hat, would be taking action with respect to the modification of the licensed premises. Town council, wearing its regular town council hat, would be taking action with respect to the license on the street. And that's all I have. So.
I had a couple
Yeah,
quick things for council to consider, and then and when I spoke with Greg initially on these, he was understanding, but the first was, this year, I think we're in a planning phase for Midland Avenue. Next year, when construction is going on and parking spaces are taken up with the construction, I think it's going to be difficult. So I just wanted to put that out there that this may not be able to be accommodated year after year in the parking. And hopefully with the construction of Midland Avenue, we're going to provide some additional opportunity for outdoor dining. The other is that the barriers over the last few years we had placed there with our crew. A bit of a change here is that we've requested that those need to be placed at the cost of the owner. And the other is I'd asked Greg, if we're going to take up these 4 spaces, would you be willing to kind of manage your employee parking so that they're not taking up spaces just adjacent to those, and encourage them to be parking kind of down here at the elementary school that will open up for the summer most likely. And then, I think a finding from the council, because we have had other requests down in Willits to do the same thing again. And we've said, we got a lot of complaints from the adjacent business owners that they didn't have adequate parking. And so I think a finding that, I think a little bit of a difference is that Greg doesn't have an opportunity for outdoor seating in front of his restaurant like they do in Willits. And so maybe, an acknowledgement of that this is a bit of a special circumstance. So.
Thank you. So what is the term of the approval? How long is this run for?
For the license is drafted just to run through the end of the fall season, as they did the last 2 years when they're needed for preparation for winter.
So does this have to be renewed annually, or what?
Yes.
This is only for this year. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And the state does require them to be done annually.
Okay.
They do, the applicant does pay an additional fee as well. And then, did you mention the sidewalk seating? That
Oh, no, I
would likely
didn't.
have to be removed. The 2 picnic tables that are there now would likely be removed, have to be removed in order to open up that space for emergency services in exchange for the seating out in the parking area.
Okay. Greg, you all aware of that?
No, it's first I've heard of it.
You received a copy of the memo?
Yeah, didn't get through that. We've been having computer problems.
Because the one thing I see in here is comments from Roaring Fork Fire and Rescue. Is that being addressed?
So their concern, I think, is with the concrete barriers that the police department is asking for.
Yeah. Well, there's basically, they're saying it should be left as parking, but they're saying in the past when we did this, if there was an emergency, like getting their outriggers out, say they needed to use a fire truck, it becomes a problem.
Between the delivery trucks and the,
Yes.
yeah, and the concrete barriers, that is an issue for Roaring Fork Fire, yes.
Okay.
I guess my question would be why wasn't it an issue the last 2 years? Or was it and we just didn't address it then?
Well, I think that part of it was that traffic wasn't as heavy. Everybody was quarantined. There wasn't as much traffic. People weren't moving around as much. We didn't have as much traffic going up and down the frying pan. We may be looking at logging trucks coming down this summer too, and that may be a concern of the fire district. I'm not sure, but.
How many parking spaces are we?
Four.
They're looking at 4.
Greg, how many seats does that equate to?
18, about 35,
About 35 extra. And what's your indoor capacity?
65.
65?
And during the summer, the past 2 summers when we've done it, our guesstimate is that it picks up about 50% of our business, our total business, weather permitting.
And do you still have the outdoor seating up back?
I do. No one uses it. I use it for private parties, but
But it doesn't get used.
it
in the
doesn't,
same
yeah,
way.
everybody wants to be out there and see and be seen, and
Because how big is that space out back?
it's fairly good size. We're using it as storage now. I wish I could put it, it'd be easier for us, because it's a straight shot from the kitchen
Yeah.
up the stairs, but when given the choice, everybody sits out front.
Well, it's shady and not shady. Bad shady.
Right.
Shady, non-sun
Maybe
shady.
a better choice of words here, but.
We have shade out back.
Shaded, shaded.
It's nice, and people would rather sit in the parking lot and watch cars go by.
It was pretty up there, I recall. It was nice.
Still is, it just can't get
Introverts
anyone
might
back
like
there.
it more than these extroverts that like sidewalk seating.
Well, this is not a public hearing. This is a resolution of town council to approve a temporary license. So, are there any additional questions for Mr. Jorgensen, or if they're not, I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 34.
I'm all for outdoor dining, but I do have concerns about, are we gonna get applications from the other 11 people?
Well, you know, that's an excellent question. I've kind of thought through. Go ahead.
I've actually talked to other owners, and obviously in downtown Basalt, everybody else has a really nice front patio that they use, and the Tipsy Trout has the
back
place
deck.
on the river that we'd all kill for, so. I haven't really heard of, and the patios out front over in Willits are larger. They have more room. So I haven't heard of anyone else really pushing for it, except me.
So I'm sorry, so last year there's the sidewalk space that has to be maintained, then the patio starts, and that's the liquor license area.
Right.
And then the liquor license has the ability to transport from the building to the defined area, so to speak. And then the concrete barriers were in place last year. I just don't remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we, as a sort of result of COVID, we, went and put them out.
Okay.
Public Works folks, put them out. But I think what we're requesting this year, is, and what's, in here is that we would not be, putting them out, that would be at the expense of the owner.
They're called river pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would they want? I'm just curious, what would they, I'd pay to have them put back there. I'm not sure what we'd use in place of them.
Yeah, no, I think that was the idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, the river pigs would be, the chief was adamant about that, just given their weight. I think they're 3,500 pounds each.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's
Safety.
much safer for folks.
So then I guess, for me, it feels like we're talking about the Midland streetscape, and then we're just gonna put up concrete barriers. I mean, what kind of landscaping is gonna accompany that?
Not much. Usually everything gets blown over, including our shade out there. If there wasn't a Midland project going in, and we were assured that we were gonna be doing it year after year, we'd throw some money at it.
But I think part of the design exercise will be to design a permanent enclosure that'll be attractive.
No, I get it. I'm just saying for this
Yeah.
year, we're just
Yeah.
putting up,
Yeah.
They are
a
painted.
wall. Okay.
But it's happened the last 2 years.
Okay.
It's a continuation of what we've been doing. It's just
And I think-
outside of the COVID.
And I think Greg
realm.
had some plants and stuff out there
Yes.
on the barriers that
They
didn't make
last
them
for a
look
little bit.
quite so harsh, right, yeah.
It's nice to sit out there.
Yeah, I love sitting outside. I'm
Like, it's a,
Okay.
I'd like to see the back deck open, though.
We have a party, we use it for private parties still, to give them their privacy, but we can't, one problem is we have a hard time staffing it. If everybody's gonna be sitting out front, then all of our energy goes that way.
Yeah, it's gonna
And
be like
then
one or the other.
two people wanna go
Right,
out back,
yeah.
and it's kind of hard to do that, but I am all for it. I would love to. It's nice, it's shady, it's where I would go. And I do.
and I thought about the same thing with like what if everybody else wants one too, but I think where we're contemplating from a design standpoint, in the long run, is gonna give this place, a good outdoor area, like everybody else
Yeah.
already has. So I'll go ahead and make a motion.
If I may, before you make a motion, just a reminder, there's two separate motions here. One is, motion is the liquor licensing authority to approve a modification of premises, and then a vote.
Okay.
It will come out as town council to approve a resolution to grant a license.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
Are we gonna charge for the rental spaces or for the parking spots?
That was not contemplated in there, no. Just that he'd have to pay his own way as far as, getting that stuff out there.
Got charged by the state, right?
Right, there was an additional $300 to turn on the extra
And turn
seating
it
and then
off.
turn it off at the end of the season, so, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take this in two pieces. The first is in our capacity as a liquor licensing authority to approve the license agreement and encroachment. No, that's
The modification of premises.
modification.
Mayor.
So
Yep.
I make a motion that we, as the liquor licensing authority, do a modification to the premises.
Perfect.
Second.
Okay, we better do a roll call on each one of these, Pam. So,
Sure, okay. Let's begin with Glenn Drummond,
Leasing the town.
Yes.
Elise Hoddle,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
yes.
Peter Schindler,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
and Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move the town council adjourn the local liquor authority and reconvene the town council.
Second.
Moving second, all in favor, aye?
All right.
Okay, we are now back as regular council. So there's a second part to our Brick Pony modification, so.
Mayor, what is it? Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 34 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Do we need a roll call? Or
We don't, no.
Good. We can do this voice vote, though. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Greg, best of luck to you, sir.
Thank you, thank y'all. Quick question, who do I talk to about the pigs?
Talk to me, just get in touch with me.
Okay,
Yeah.
and just so I can kind of schedule everybody else who's gonna be helping put everything up and getting organized, what kind of time frame we talking about?
As far as like notice, or?
Yeah, or actually getting them out there so we can start setting it up because they're the,
When does it, I'm sorry, does it start?
Now,
Okay.
once it's
So-
signed.
Yeah.
Well, As
So we
soon
got,
as soon as the state approves.
Yeah,
haven't
the
received
license is effective once it's executed, but the modification to the liquor license is not until the state's approved.
Right,
correct?
so you can set it up, just
Yeah.
can't serve liquor out there yet.
Okay.
Right, sorry.
So, why don't you call me tomorrow and we'll
Okay.
figure out a time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on. Next order of business, item 7C, public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 11, series of 2022, ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving a contract to buy and sell real estate with MSP 1 LLC for 4 deed-restricted lots in the Stotts Mill subdivision. James?
Thank you. As the mayor indicated, this is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance that would approve of the purchase of the 4 deed-restricted lots in Stotts Mill. The council approved the ordinance on first reading. Each one of the lots has a price cap on it, and they're just over $200,000 apiece. We're proposing to use some of the Basalt Forward 2030 funds to purchase the lots. Each one is for a single-family house, or you could combine them for a duplex. The council directed staff through a resolution in April to bring forward the contract. The contract has a closing date near the end of June. So this evening, staff would recommend taking public comment as it is a public hearing and providing council discussion. And if you're comfortable, you could approve the ordinance on second reading.
Thanks, James. We have anyone public care to address council on ordinance number 11? That doesn't look like be the case. Anyone calling in virtually? I don't believe so.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 11, series of 2022 on second reading.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Please call the roll, Pam.
Okay, let's begin with Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Peter Schindler,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Elise Huddle.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Great. Gail Schwartz is here tonight. Gail, you want to come up for our next item? This is ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving a recreational use easement agreement with Basalt Vista Affordable Housing Partnership. So Ryan and Jeff, you guys have been, I was almost said monkeying. You haven't been monkeying, you've been working out the details of this agreement.
So, yeah, just as a reminder, it's been a few meetings have passed since we've spoken about this, but Gail had approached the town. They were just looking at their overall costs for managing the HOA, and then also looking at the liability side of maintaining the hillside above their subdivision for recreation purposes. And so in our discussions, we had uncovered an opportunity to create an easement, which is allowed by state statute, and it's a recreational use easement. And it essentially affords the owner of the property, in this case an HOA, the same liability limits that a government would have. So if you know, in a town park, for example, we have liability limits for people using that park. That same will be extended to the HOA ultimately. And so this area up behind the subdivision has historically been used for wintertime activities, pretty much for sledding. And so that was sort of an agreed upon condition when the approval was taking place, and that was like sort of a verbal agreement that the applicant had agreed to at the time. And the delay was the applicant was having some trouble with obtaining insurance for the insurance carrier to kind of fully wrap their head around how it would be that governmental immunity would extend to a private owner. And so Bill Crowley, who's the HOA manager, I think it is, had shopped this around, talked to a few different insurance carriers, and landed on one that was able to, offer them coverage for the subdivision, including continued public use and having this recreation easement on it. So here we are. We finally got it solved, and I think a pretty nice solution. Anything?
Yeah, just to add a couple of things. In your packet, there is a redline version of the easement agreement that reflect the changes since first reading. Some of those relate to, by the time this, if approved, this agreement would be effective, the parcel will be owned by the association because we'll have transitioned out of developer control. We also made some changes after as Ryan mentioned, feedback from insurance company and then consultation with our own insurer at CIRSA. And so to kind of ensure that the town's insurance would cover the public's uses pursuant to the easement, just like it would be, or, that's would be in play. And, actually, since this has been entered in the packet, and I would actually recommend one additional change, and I expect that this is probably all right, but this is more of a clarifying thing to ensure that a public recreation use by the public isn't perceived to be outside the scope of the easement. And that would be simply to, in the grant of the easement, to clarify that it's for public recreational purposes, including, and then the rest of it remain the same: hiking, sledding, tubing, picnicking. And so just out of the abundance of caution. And so our understanding from the new insurance carrier with Basalt Vista that would not be a problem for their coverage, and I think that would work better for us. And so after you have an opportunity for Gail to present, I might help council tee up a motion with some of that language changes, but just wanted to alert you to that here. So.
Okay, great. Hi, Gail. Do you want to
Mr. Mayor,
make any comments
council
about
members?
this? Yeah.
I didn't know if we were going to be able to pull up.
Sorry, I didn't find one.
I'm so sorry. Well, for the new council members, if you didn't, because it's taken a little while to find a insurance policy for this, as I called an elegant solution, but the parcel that was donated to Basalt Vista from the Roaring Fork School District included much more land than we needed, so about half the parcel contains all the homes. But above it, going up to the Light Hill Trail, was also part of the parcel. Well, I tried desperately to give it to the town of Basalt or back to the school district or to Pickens County, and we found this solution with the recreation easement. It is in statute. It's pretty common for landowners. It's used by the conservation community, ABLT. It's very familiar with it. So this is an opportunity that, should there be an unfortunate accident there, that the homeowners, again, low and moderate income homeowners, would not be liable and to cover a very unfortunate accident. So the governmental caps on the government and the governmental immunity is really a wonderful solution to the use of the parcel, which through our ordinance, the park that we built and maintain will remain public, and there are certain hours of the day, but as will the hillside. And then at the end of the day, should there be a debris flow, that we put in that drainage basin, and that we will carry insurance to maintain that basin should there be a problem there. So that we were clarifying that is not part of the agreement or part of the easement. I did have a question, why biking and snowshoeing or cross-country skiing was redlined.
So those changes to that paragraph too were largely in response to comments from your prior insurance carrier, and those were some of the things that were pointed to as problematic for them, which are not problematic for your new insurance company. But so if those strike-through changes on paragraph 2, if I would expect that the council would be okay with including those those deletions in light of our changed circumstances.
I would hope so, that that broad spectrum of activity that we know that goes on on the hillside, all of which will be included. And we do have a policy now through State Farm for the homeowners association, and we are just turning that homeowners association. We just turned it over recently to the homeowners, and I'll remain until the LOC is dissolved. But we're pretty excited about this point in time, but resolving this one liability question is really sort of last order of business for us. So thank you.
Just as a curiosity, just doesn't bear directly on our decision here at all. But how do the Basalt Vista homeowners view that hillside? Is it a recreational amenity, or is it an attractive nuisance that worries them, or is it both, or neither? How do folks
I would
view it?
say how fortunate to have access to that open space.
Yeah.
And then part of our ordinance, we did build the park, and we also built another access trail up to the Light Hill Trail that is it's not for a handicap use, but it may be utilized by a handicapped person. It's a much milder grade. But I would say that the homeowners, really integrated the recreation there and hike there, and their kids are out there, and it's a pretty extraordinary opportunity, as they have with the garden, as they have with the bike facility. So that's all just makes the neighborhood even better. So I would say it was my perception that there could be a liability, because it's always been the sledding hill, and that was a big risk that we didn't want them to have to bear.
Great. Any questions, guys?
I have one. Overall, I still like the elegant solution and everything. With the insurance, did that change from the first reading where we had the town agrees to add owner to our policy? Was that they were going to carry a policy and just have the easement? Now they're going to be going on to our insurance policy. And if so, just from a kind of risk profile and cost perspective, what is the impacts of that?
Sure. So the change here is that the underlying question is, under what right is the public using this property? And here we're formalizing that through a grant of an easement to the public through the town. And so much like a trail going through a private property owner's property, if it was a grant from that property owner through the town would insurance would cover those uses, and if done pursuant to the easement agreement. And so that's kind of the shift here. That's kind of the one main change that needed to occur. That's consistent with how the other recreational use easements are structured. And so again, we had a conversation with CIRSA about this, just to make sure that there weren't any issues from their perspective, and this is in line with their comments, I'd say. And so there's a little bit of a different shift there. Now, just to be clear, and I think I maybe used this example when talking to Gail, the town's insurance doesn't cover somebody doing a backflip on a dirt bike from the top of the trail, so that's outside the scope of what the easement would be. And that's the association has underlying property owners insurance, and this easement agreement helps kind of reduce, I guess, some of the expense and risk exposure on their side. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there like a percent? I'm just curious, like a percentage, like a 50% reduction, what do you think, or?
Of the cost, I'm not sure, but so what it is the recreational use easement, the recreational use statute implications are basically, as the underlying landowner, you kind of get to step into the shoes of the governmental entity in terms of liability as it relates to those easement uses. So it would be that you're subject to the limits of the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, which are roughly $330,000 per claim, and a total of like 1.1 in the aggregate for any single occurrence. Now, as it relates to just how does this affect their bottom line on what your overall insurance costs are, I don't know if we ever quite figured that out, but it was, I think it helped.
Absolutely, it helped. And we also found an insurer that kind of understood the concept. So there are many opportunities that are afforded in statute for limiting liability. For example, the agritourism statute protects farmers and ranchers when they have people coming on their land to do whatever. And so these are just opportunities that you now enjoy a parcel that's really a public parcel, and it's a good partnership for us.
Great. I think we all see it that way.
How does the motion do that?
I think, I'm not sure if we took public comment yet, but we should make sure we do that.
So we will open the floor for public comment. Bill, do you want to say anything? You're not public, you're probably party to the...
I'll make a comment as it relates to Bill. Bill has been really great to work with through this whole process and hustling around and really been fantastic. So thanks,
Really
Bill.
fantastic. We're in good hands with Silver Mountain Properties.
So Bill, you're muted. I don't know if you want to say hello or say anything. There you are. You're on.
Just thank you for your time, and appreciate Gail and Jeff and Ryan's efforts, because it's been a team effort for sure to get this to the finish line, and hopefully it's beneficial for all parties.
Good deal. Thanks for your all your efforts on this too. This is a great win-win, I think, for the community here. So thanks everybody that's worked hard on this. I didn't mean to demean your efforts by referring to them as monkeying with the audience. It's a slip of the tongue.
So do we want to restore the deleted text and delete the added text or something?
Well, I'll set it up for you. So I can lay out a motion. Somebody could say so moved if they agree. But a motion of the town council to adopt ordinance number 6, series of 2022 on second reading, with the changes set forth in the packet, except for those strike-through changes in paragraph 2.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. So Pam, I think we better call the roll on this guy.
Yep, okay, let me get all of that. We had David Knight and then Glenn Drummond. Who second?
I second.
Oh, that was Ryan Slack, thank you. Sorry, I was looking down, so I wasn't. Okay. Second. Okay. Let's begin with Bill Kane.
Yes.
Dieter Schindler?
Yes.
David Knight?
Yes.
Angela Anderson?
Yes.
Glenn Drummond?
Yes.
Elise Hoddle?
Yes.
And Ryan Slack?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Great. Gail, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Mayor,
we follow from a distance all the remarkable successes at Habitat for Humanity, and so bring it on. We're ready for some more.
may I please share with you an invitation to our dedication on the 23rd of May.
Oh, great.
We will be finished, and we'll have moved out all of our construction activity. As we said, we turned over the HOA. You have, as we've mentioned, 27 homes representing 47 jobs, basically in the community, and that serve 70 to 100% AMI. And it's been, I think, a wonderful success. We just received, if you hadn't heard, an award by Habitat for Humanity International for the most outstanding multifamily project internationally for Basalt Vista.
Congratulations.
So this is an internationally acclaimed, but what it does demonstrate is that you can have affordability and net zero combined. As we know, our homeowners are paying $14 a month in their utility bills. So we're going to ask if you might join us, if I can just share these invitations, and maybe Ryan, you might put that by the water cooler or something to make sure.
You want to give those to Pam, and
Yeah,
we'll
and
make sure they get distributed?
just know that this has been
Thanks, Cal.
such an extraordinary partnership, and really demonstrating that through partnerships with the school district, Picken County, Town of Basalt, and then all of the generous donors, that we can provide housing like this, and we can really address the needs of our workforce and our community. And so just a big thank you. We hope to see you on the 23rd and have some comments from you all, but we really has been extraordinary. So we're off to build 20 new homes in Rifle, and we've just been awarded 20 new homes in Glenwood Springs. So we have 2 projects teed up, and stay tuned.
Where are the units in Glenwood Springs?
So there are 2 parcels that were owned by the city of Glenwood Springs, and they went through a pretty elaborate process, identifying 30 parcels they had. They came up with 2 developable parcels. They put out an RFP for it. Of course, we're the only ones that bid on the RFP, because we like to lose money, as we always say, when we build homes. And it will be one at right on 8th Street as you turn on Midland. There's a small parcel there across from that beautiful parkland area. And there's another parcel, so that will be 8 townhouses, and then another parcel over by the airport that will be townhomes. So we'll take our design that we put together for Rifle and pretty well duplicate it on those 2 parcels. So
good deal.
That we'll be looking forward to doing that. But so.
Well, congratulations. That's all great progress.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now move to item number 7A, public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 12, series of 2022, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, for a supplemental appropriation for additional carryover of funds from the 2021 budget to 2022 budget for various projects and additional tobacco tax expenditures. Christie.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the second reading. We reviewed this in detail at the first reading. I had a couple of changes to the budget based upon carryovers from the prior year, and reconciliations that I added to this, as well as the addition for the tobacco tax funding that was approved at the last council meeting. So that's pretty much all there is to this ordinance.
Great. Questions? Entertain a motion.
Public hearing.
Oh, this is public hearing. Okay, any public not present, and there's nobody calling in. So with that, I think if there are no further questions, I would entertain a motion on.
Mayor, I move that the Town Council adopt ordinance number 12, series of 2022 on second reading.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call.
Thank you. Okay, let's begin with David Knight.
Yes.
Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Thank you. Elise Hoddle.
Yes.
Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Bill Kane.
Yes.
And Dieter Schindler.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Okey-doke, thank you. On to resolution number 35, series of 2022, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, electing to receive fiscal recovery funds as a revenue loss eligible use category. That's a mouthful. That's pretty cryptic, too.
It is. Trust me,
It's gonna take some explaining.
we know this has
You've
been
got some
very
explaining
cryptic.
to do here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was interesting because a few of Jeff's colleagues were talking about this, that the federal government was really wanting people to take this standard allowance, they're calling it, up to $10 million, which we only have $1 million, which is still our cap, for revenue loss. So it's kind of like a standard deduction for revenue loss. So it allows us to just take the money regardless of revenue loss. But what they do want to show with that is that there's council agreeance to doing so. So the reason why this was so attractive for the town is because there's really very, very little reporting that's required under this particular option. And so we'd still utilize the funding, as Ryan said earlier, for Midland Avenue Streetscape in the 2023 and 2024 years, but we're not going to have to require all of the contractors to keep these copious records and make sure that they're complying with Davis-Bacon Wage Act. And I mean, the list goes on. So it really does help everybody, I think, with the Midland project pretty significantly. So.
Yeah.
What's
That's
the
great.
downside, Christy? Because I read this and I was like, I don't understand.
Okay, there's no downside. I mean, so the only thing is that I had to, you know, with Ryan's help and Jeff's help, report this by April 30th to take this, this revenue reduction or revenue loss calculation thing. And anyway, so I did that. So if you guys don't approve it, then I'll probably have to go back and say, oh, well, actually, we want to do all that other reporting. But this is actually the best option. I don't see any downside.
And I'll just add a few things. Christy and I chased this down pretty good.
Yeah.
To get exactly at that question. And it's really, this is coming from the Treasury Department. They're asking local governments to take the money as a revenue loss during the rulemaking process from their interim rule to the final rule. They determined and created this way to accept the funds as the standard allowance, that you do not have to demonstrate a revenue loss in order to treat it as a revenue loss. If you would like up to $10 million, if you're showing and claiming a revenue loss in excess of that, then you have to follow some very complicated formula. And so this is really a way for the government, federal government, to reduce its administrative burden in doling out these ARPA funds. So.
Great.
Yeah, and the problem with the timing of the whole thing is that they didn't come out with any sort of clarification on this rule until April 27th. And we had to report on April 30th, of course. So this is why we're coming now.
So how is the receipt of funds a revenue loss? Can you explain that?
Well, it's, see, what they did is they took a standard average revenue loss that they anticipated for all municipal governments, no matter what size, of $10 million. That's where they came up with that number. So it's not because you're getting additional money, it's a revenue loss. They're saying, well, most governments, if they would have followed their normal trajectory, would have lost a substantial amount of monies because of COVID. And we're going to just call it 10 million.
Yeah.
Up to 10 million.
The itemized way sounds onerous, right?
It is,
Yeah.
yes.
And just to be to step back, the funds are doled out to cover infrastructure costs or to address lost revenue of communities. And so we were proceeding down this infrastructure path, which carried all these administrative burdens in reporting, just under kind of some of those standard requirements of the federal government. And then on the revenue loss side, they created this standard allowance to reduce that administrative burden. So.
Okay, I think I understand.
Okay.
It's like a 100-page document, so.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's fun reading.
Although I haven't been sleeping well, so.
I'll let you borrow it if you'd like.
And just real quick, why were we limited to the million? Because of the size, or?
That's because our total allocation was 1 million.
Okay.
So it's limited to our allocation. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks for the clarification.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 35, series of 2022.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. We can approve this by voice vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Resolution 35 is approved. Last order of business for tonight is resolution number 36, series of 2022. Resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving the Third Amendment to Employment Agreement with Town Manager regarding housing benefit. There isn't someone identified. I'd be pleased to, for the benefit and the interest of full transparency with our public and people that are maybe listening in or viewing the meeting tonight. We have been working long and hard to try to find suitable and permanent housing for our town manager in Basalt for several years now. And we finally, I think after maybe 4 or 5 attempts, we finally have found a unit that works. And so our existing agreement provides for a housing benefit of $2,000 a month or occupancy of a town-owned unit, which our town manager has taken advantage of. So now, in order to make this ownership opportunity a reality, the time has come to reevaluate the housing allowance, especially in light of the fact that over the last 24 months, we've had approximately a 77% increase in the median cost of a housing unit in the town of Basalt, which is a pretty startling number. With that, and what we, I think, as council have deemed to be a benefit to have our town manager reside in the town of Basalt with his wife and 2 kids, we think there's an enormous public benefit that flows from that. This resolution would increase the housing benefit from $2,000 to $3,000 a month. I think, are there any other amendments in there, Jeff?
That's it. It's a simple strike through to change 2,000 to 3,000 in the town manager agreement.
And we did discuss, when the time is right, we will reevaluate the COLA or, relative to what we now know about inflation. Maybe don't know. So with that, any further discussion? Questions, comments? I'd entertain a resolution to
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 36, series of 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's a good evening. Thanks, everybody. Exciting stuff. Town accomplishments. The streetscape work is really off to a good start. So really a lot of fun stuff to look forward to here. Thank you all.